From the broken ruins of Babylon, this is End of Days Radio. I am your host, Daniel, broadcasting to you all the way from that shimmering Emerald City, right here in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Hello, how are you? It's so good to see you. Today's date is April 30th, 2020. The coronavirus is still wrecking society. It is wrecking the world around us. The economy continues to bobble up and down. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Right? It's pretty scary. But we can worry about that later. Today's guest is CMurph. That's right. He's back again due to popular demand. And we have quite a bit to talk about with him this second go around. He's back not to talk about the crazy flying UFOs and triangle crafts that are stalking him, but something a little different this time. We're going to peel back the layers of history and we are going to explore something called Tartaria, as well as what's known as the Mud Flood. That should be fun as well. If I can get my mic working a little bit better and actually record myself. There we go. That's better. And remember to go to endofdaysradio.com for all things End of Days Radio. Get our updated schedule as well as the donate link. If you'd like to donate to the show, definitely appreciate your donations. Helps keep the lights on, helps keep the show up. But we can talk about that later. Let's go ahead and get into the gist of it. Let's bring on our guest, Connor Murphy. Connor, are you there?
Hey, yep. How are you?
Doing great. I do not see you on the screen. What am I doing wrong here?
I'm not sure if this computer's letting. Yeah, I don't think that the camera's showing up because I switched this to Linux and it's not giving me an option. But I was just gonna screen share anyway, if that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll go ahead and let the world continue to stare at my mug. If you want to go ahead and bring up the share screen.
Yeah. There we go.
CMurph grew up in Chicago, but he lives now in New York State. As you know, he's a boxer and he has a lifetime of experience fighting. He's also a spiritual researcher who has been studying secret societies as well as the global elite Illuminati. And he's now, as you know from our last show, being stalked by some really strange craft in the sky. And his main thing is actually what we're going to talk about here, this hidden history. Connor, I'm sorry, CMurph, my bad, dude. What got you into this?
Well, I actually stumbled upon a couple of things just by chance. It wasn't really like I was searching out for it, but I had originally studied like secret societies and different religions. You know, you're trying to figure out things. And I was young, and after a while, you kind of start piecing it together, and you're like, there's a whole lot of connections and similarities between ancient cultures. And for years, I kind of wrote it off, but then I kept on seeing stuff like what you see on screen here, where it just sort of connects all of these similar, either I guess you could call them idols or cultures or beliefs, whatever, architecture. And the more that I continued to research it, the more that I realized that these cultures weren't just similar in that they are they had similar beliefs. You can kind of be like, oh, like that sounds a lot like this. It was downright to the point where it's actually almost identical, from Mesopotamia to ancient Egypt to ancient India and the Native American cultures as well. So I did some more digging, and thanks to a lot of people that I'll probably list at the end, but a lot of people helped me out with this and gave me a ton of resources, and literally months of research has I think that I've connected a lot of the dots, and even professional anthropologists have been taking some of their info from it. And it seems like everybody who gets pretty deep into this comes to the same conclusion. I'll let all you guys come to your conclusion on your own. I just kind of want to get some of this out there. But essentially, it just it basically stemmed from all of these civilizations being so interconnected in a time where, or in all ancient times, really, where it should not have been this similar, if that makes any type of sense whatsoever, because it's like nowadays with the internet you could understand how people all over the world have different cultures, but they claim that that these parts of the world were kind of isolated, and like ancient China didn't really have much connection with the Western world or the Native Americans. Well, they do say that some Chinese went over there, but as civilizations go.
Hey, I really hate to do this. I hate to like stop you halfway, but your name is showing on the
Oh, it's all good.
Zoom. Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay. I just wanted
yeah,
to
forget
double.
it. Yeah,
All right, awesome. I just want to double check for safety reasons. I mean, I'm totally willing to, do what we have to do to. But if it's all good, then
yeah.
please continue.
Maybe after we'll edit it out, but it's all right.
Yeah, not
I
I can't really edit it because it's actually like on the screen.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
We'll
awesome.
do it as is.
Just
Keep it
wanted
going.
to do my due diligence and make sure I made you aware of that.
Yeah, no, I mean this stuff is I don't want to say it's common knowledge, but it's anybody can find it. I'm just kind of putting it all in one spot.
Okay, right on.
It's not as much like the last show where that's a bit more. I don't even want to say controversial, just a bit more
And guys, the only
condemning, I
reason, yeah, the
guess.
only reason I'm stopping things like that is because this is serious business. Like what CMurph is talking about is literally what they don't want you to know, and that's something that I
Yeah,
found
and
out.
it's
Go ahead.
no, sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, it's just it's very out in the open in that if you want to take your time and look for it, you'll be able to. But it's very suppressed in that the mainstream, like for example, what I was taught up with growing, or what I was taught growing up in public schools and all that, completely different story than what the evidence actually tells. And I think towards the end of this, you'll kind of see why they kept all of this a secret.
And like you said at the beginning when you started talking, somehow, even though these connections will be right in front of our face, all my whole life for 37 years, I never made these connections because I just kind of accepted what was taught to me in school, what I saw on PBS. That was reality to me.
Yep. And their explanation at the base level is like plausible, so you don't really like assume that they're kind of messing with facts or hiding things from you. But then once you start making the bigger connections, it's like there is no absolute way that the personally, I think that even what we're looking at here on screen, the basic main concept behind this is humanity has moved around a lot, specifically a certain group of people, the Basques. And the thing that's incredible about it is that like so for example, the people who live in many of these places now may not have the same DNA or look the same as people who had lived there thousands of years ago. That should go without saying, but for whatever reason, people really don't like to hear that. And that's it's not even really a theory. That's basically what I'm going to get into. And I have a couple tabs open with DNA evidence that can back this up. So, I'm not just talking out of my ass, because I probably wouldn't believe this if people like Ebon and other researchers, like the Atlantean Gardens YouTube channel. I don't want to butcher his name, but it's Robert Seffer, I believe. He's an anthropologist. Like, if they didn't shove this information in your face where it's like you can't deny it, I don't know if I would have believed it, even with all the evidence, just because of the fact that it's so surreal, and it's going to change how you look at the world for sure.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I guess I'll
Especially
just get right into it.
especially what you're talking about because human origins are so contested and so controversial because we get into things like culture. And with culture, people have their own opinions and their differences. So that might be part of the reason why this information is so explosive and so hard to get to because it
Hmm.
creates that sort of cultural controversy.
Well, and a big thing that has been pushed on us that I believed literally up until a couple of months ago when I started researching this and realized I don't want to call anything impossible, but the likelihood of this is next to nothing. Is the theory that's pushed on us is that we all originate from Africa, from one common ancestor, when in reality, like Orientals and Basque Europeans and haplogroup J and Africans, normal Europeans, Aboriginals, they all have such strikingly different DNA. It's not just like one group of people moved north and now they're a different skin color. There's a lot more differences going on than just that. And the DNA is basically what ties it all together. It's just it's almost as well, it is as if they're trying to suppress a lot of cultures. And this isn't just the cultures that we're going to talk about today. I think that you can probably apply this to like any group of people throughout the world. They've in some way, shape, or form misconstrued or suppressed their cultures, and it's very interesting. Like right here, you see the Sumerians. A lot of people argue that that's the oldest civilization, and it's probably close, but I would say that it's not, due to the fact that Atlantis has a lot of evidence for it. Ancient Egypt was probably around the same time too. But as you can see, just right off the bat, all of this stuff is strikingly similar in terms of the winged. I don't know if deity would be the correct term, but it's essentially what they're going for here. And let's see, this is going to be
And
this
you
is in
have to ask
Antarctica.
yourself, what are the chances? And let me just apologize real quick. This is the first time that I've ever used Zoom for this show. So if there's a few little hiccups, people, I do apologize. We're having a little bit of a volume issue earlier. I think I went ahead and got that figured out, but I do apologize for that. But what are the chances that these similarities would exist in these cultures that existed that long ago and were that far apart? Just try to do the math in your head and you'll quickly realize it's an impossibility.
Exactly, and it's hard to read, but this right here shows Mesoamerican and Egyptian pyramids, and it's like this is across the planet, and it's so strikingly similar. The architecture, it's like I I I don't think that any reasonable person can look at that and say that they both came up with that on their own. You know what I mean? Like around, I guess the Mesoamericans would be a bit later than the Egyptians, but what's more likely and what is probably fact is that those same people traveled either from an original root civilization or beginning point and traveled east and west from it somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, which is where Atlantis comes in. Some went to Europe, the Mediterranean, North Africa, and then the others would have found themselves in the Americas. And um, that's basically what you see here with the architecture. And the thing that the reason why we were actually going to do this show earlier, but I kind of needed more time to research this because stumbled across a video where they found these remnants in Antarctica and a lot of like destruction and buildings and pyramids. And I was like, I need to do a lot more research because that still is some, not a mystery, but it's almost unexplainable given the climate of Antarctica now that they could build such monolithic, like huge structures that are all so similar. But it's it's crazy, and this is a message. But you see, some one of the common traits that you're going to notice with a lot of these things are Rh negative DNA traits. One of them being blue eyes. So when people picture Sumerians, I don't think that they picture them like this, but you look at some of the stuff that they have, and it's very apparent that the Rh negative blood type runs rampant in all of these civilizations. And another thing to notice is all these civilizations are destroyed, including Tartaria. So, like, something happened, be it mud floods, actual floods, some type of, I don't know if it was a plasma event or what could have caused some of the melting that we'll probably show pictures of later. But all of this has been erased, and now Rh negative people are a very huge minority. I think it's less than 15% of the world have it. And blue eyes, green eyes, red hair, blonde hair are some of the traits that are associated with that. And you see it with a lot of their culture. But back to the buildings, you can see very, very similar structures. And Also, another thing to note is in Washington, D.C., and I'm sure in various places in Europe, you're going to see the same type of architecture that is basically mimicked from the old world. And now we're going to get into the stuff that will really mess with your mind. This is just a little screenshot I took, but something to pay attention to is look at these windows. So they're basically built into the ground, like about halfway through. And nobody is going to build a building like that, first of all. So what this is implying is that the land was lower when it was built. But don't just take the evidence from this picture because that wouldn't be enough. But just keep that in mind as you're watching this. Now take a look at this, and Mike DeVino, I have to give a shout out to him. I probably should have cropped out the name, but regardless, he got banned from Twitter for some BS, probably for posting about this, but he posted so much good information that I had to share. This one is in Paris, and take a look at how deep that goes when you go digging, because now this above is all you're going to see when you're walking down the street. Little do you know, you're walking on the ruins of some type of ancient structure that dwarfs this. Like, excuse me, look at how tiny that couple story building is in comparison to what's built below it. And that's nowhere near the bottom, as you can tell. Like, those are columns. So those columns are at least going down a bit farther. That's Paris. Then you'll look at this, and it's just unbelievable. Because, and once again, look, I can't imagine that this is even the bottom. So it's like, I don't know. The thing that I would say that I'm not 100% sure on, but it doesn't really matter, is that I'm not sure if they're building on top of these, and I don't think that they are, or if they're just using the top of these structures and like remodeling them over time and fixing them up, because that's what it appears to be. There's a whole lot of wear and tear below ground. And another question you got to ask yourself, and that I was asking myself when I stumbled upon these, is what the hell could have caused that? Because that's just not, it is not natural at all for a building to be swept under that much. Like, you can kind of see the
Yeah.
reference points from
Yeah.
people, like
And
just how big this is.
what's really crazy about this is that like when I first started talking to CMurph, who kind of got me into this stuff, well, I started thinking about what's called the Seattle Underground. And the Seattle Underground is basically an underground city, and the second largest city in Washington, Tacoma, has the same thing. And if you look at just about any city like Paris or any of these cities in the world, they all seem to have some kind of underground.
Yep. It's, and the thing is once again, like, you go back to the other picture that I showed, you can see it kind of in the background over there. Same exact structure with the columns. No matter where you go, whether it's Rome, the Native Americans, the Goths, all of these cultures are the same. And then you look below the surface, and it's like the same kind of structure of it all, but just massive, quite a bit bigger. For example, this is Grand Central Station, and now that now I'm not going to say that people our size couldn't build this, like how this caption is implying, because it's possible they could. But considering how old this is and how old these structures, like this was not the mod excuse me, the bottom part is what's important, because this mud flood or pre-mud flood architecture had to have been here before the colonists arrived, because you just take one look at that, and they've definitely did some re-embellishing and making sure that it looks nicer, and you can tell that's a lot of old wear and tear, and once again goes back to the ancient Romans and Greeks and far before them, honestly.
Based on when
That
these
this
some of these pictures are taken, basically this stuff should look new, people. It should look new based on when the photos are
Yep.
taken. It doesn't look new. It looks hundreds of years old at
Hmm.
least.
And that, and the size of it, like, once again, you see the people in here. There's no purpose, first of all, to build it this big unless you're just going for grandeur. But the more that you research these civilizations, you learn they're not as wasteful as we are today. That they typically have a purpose for all of their structures, like the pyramids and everything else. So this begs the question, and it brings giants into this topic, which we'll get into later, I think, because I want to push through some of these images first. But it, the massive structures. are just huge. And this is Chicago. There was a lot of weird stuff in the World Fair. They say that they erected not this, but many of these buildings just for the World Fair and then destroyed them after a year, which is the biggest load of crap I've ever seen. But once again, the architecture looks very gothic, and it's once again very similar to the rest of the world. And this looks nicer than the skyscrapers that I see there now. I'm just throwing that out there. But hopefully this is it. So this is the agricultural building from the Chicago World's Fair. They said that it was built in 6 months and torn down. Like as you were saying, this like you look at it, this has a lot of age on it. This was not built in 6 months.
And you
I
have
can
to ask
guarantee you this.
yourself, why would they build something made of these types of materials that are these complicated that are this complicated looking and then tear them down? It makes no sense.
Just for the Chicago World's Fair. That's it. That's literally it. And that's what they tell us. And you don't bat an eye when you hear this in social studies talking about the World's Fair history class, but they don't show you these pictures. And if you see these pictures, you'd understand this architect. And once again, this is post mud flood from what I understand. It's maybe shortly after, but couldn't be that long, or it couldn't be like that far ahead. And this probably is just the top. Like this might be just the top of the structure that we're looking at here, and it's huge. And maybe that's it. If this is just it too for this particular example, point still stands. They're not building this in 6 months. And look at the intricate designs. Once again, going back to like the ancient. I don't even want to call them gods, but that's I guess what they would refer to them as. They have all of these structures, and it's like they're not gonna do this just for 6 months, but regardless. Now, here's the evidence. So there's some old maps. This one's from 1975, and take a look at the lakes on those maps versus now, and you can say that it's just like old school. They messed it up, but given the fact that their architecture is a lot better than ours, I'd say that's extremely unlikely. And they don't show us this, because there the mud flood essentially would explain this to a T, because the areas would have looked extremely different, and the lakes gotten smaller because of the mud flood. There's more land. It also covers things up, which means that the land had been rising. So there's quite a few things. Here's another one. The Tennessee Continental Exposition in Nashville, Tennessee. They destroyed vast majority of this. And they once again, it's a turn of the century destruction of the same looking cityscape called an expo. And they're stealing history is what this is should be very apparent to you, is that they're destroying a lot of ancient history. It really, when I first started researching it, reminded me of the Cultural Revolution in China, where they destroyed all of the ancient artifacts and architecture. And here's another one. So you have the same symbol, the Seal of Solomon, from Ethiopia, Phoenicia, ancient Egypt, or not ancient Egypt, ancient India, Mesopotamia. Eh, It's just, come on. And they tell us that it's just one thing. I can't pretend like I've researched this for like years that many people have, but all I can tell you is that that's an ancient symbol, and I know that it represents certain things like as above, so below, and the Merkaba. If you look at it in 3D, like this Roman one is kind of showing, but this is an ancient symbol, and there's a lot more going on with that. And once again, though, the big thing here for my point that I'm trying to make, all connected, all connected. And do you think that these are all different people, or do you think that it's the same people moving around the earth? And I strongly feel it's the latter. This is another picture of some of the old world.
And you got to ask yourself, why
Excuse
is
me.
it that we think that it's from whatever recent century? Why is it that we think that something's not right?
Yep. And look, even this building, they I guess gracefully let stand, unlike most of them. But look at how much they removed from it in terms of the checkerboard flooring, which has got quite a few meanings in itself. And that's another thing. All of these old buildings seem to have sacred geometry or other types of uh, strong architecture in them that are connected to ancient spirituality and other things. But it's very tough to tell. And this is just more common being, I'll say, entity that is shown in Mesoamerica. And then this is a book called How the Scots Invented the Modern World. I probably should have thrown that in at the end, but the Scottish people often have this Rh negative blood. Not as much as the Basques. The Basques are probably the most, but the Berbers, the Celtics, most Europeans probably have it. And then this is what I was looking for. This is an ancient map of Tartaria, and those structures that I was showing you are in America. So this is only showing more than half the world, I guess, but the other side of the world is not shown. This was a worldwide empire, and it clearly existed into the 1800s, had its own flag, and its territory was huge. But the thing is, at some point, it's somehow quietly incorporated into Russia and then split up into many other countries. But it, it's unbelievable that a civilization of this scale that dwarfs the Roman Empire is somehow overlooked throughout history, and we're not taught about this.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
mean,
wasn't taught about this in
what we're
school.
looking at right now, it says British Encyclopedia 1771. Tartaria. This is an encyclopedia.
Yeah, but at some point the encyclopedias stopped including this really towards the end of the 1800s around all those world fairs when they're destroying all of it. Um,
Yeah, it's
let
like
me see.
it's literally like our history books aren't entirely accurate. Go figure.
That's the only explanation. And let's see, that might have been the end of those pictures, but now we'll get into this. So this is where Blavatsky, Plato, and various other I'm not sure if it was John Doe or John Dee, but many of them write about Atlantis. And Atlantis, if you don't know, is the fallen civilization that's said to be buried in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. And I just want you to imagine. I'm not sure if I was able to find the other picture. I was looking for it, but this is the theory on how Europe was populated. And the Berbers in North Africa in these islands are they're typically blonde hair, blue eyed, Rh negative people. Basques extremely Rh negative. Gaelics also extremely Rh negative. But if you just imagine over here, like on the other side, let's say that this civilization did have the catastrophic end that many great philosophers and researchers in secret societies believe, they would have fled mostly this way into Europe, into the Mediterranean, and this would be probably around the time Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt come around. But the other ones, it's very likely that they went that way into the Americas, North and South America, and then the Atlanteans settled there as well. And there's so much evidence for that we're going to get into. This is inscribed in 3 ancient languages and found in a burial mound in Iowa. Remember this, Iowa indicates that the Europeans, Iberians, and Celtic Iberians, which Iberia is in Spain, which they don't tell you now, there is an Iberia in the Middle East, but we'll get to that later, had colonized the area in 800 BC. And the hieroglyphs tell you how to regulate the calendar at the moment of sunrise on the first day of the year, defined as the spring equinox. And the spring equinox, if you know anything about ancient history, many, many, many ancient spiritualities hold that in high regard as a very, I don't know if holiday would be the right word, but definitely a day of rites and has massive historical value for that purpose. But once again, this was found in Iowa. So this is a guy who, actually, various people contributed to this, that ancient South America was these same civilizations that are similar to Atlantis, that they have come from Atlantis, similar to Egypt, I should say, that they both came from Atlantis. And that's a book that, if you guys want to go into it, you can check it out. I've read a lot of excerpts from that. People have sent to me, but a ton of information that's basically saying this. And then here's a little story. In 1831, the Choctaw Indians endured death and starvation when they were forced out of Mississippi to travel the Trail of Tears. And just 16 years later, they learned of the people in Ireland who were starving to death during the potato famine and donated all the money they had to the strangers across the sea. Now, that sounds pretty random if you think about it. Like, they're dealing with all of that, but they're just going to donate to some strangers, in quotes, so they say, across the sea. Well, the thing about this is that what you're going to find out is that these people, the Irish and the Native Americans, many Native American tribes, and I'm going to prove this for you guys, share the same DNA as the Irish and the Basques and various basically the Europeans in general. The Basques, I believe, are the originals. I think that they're the original Cro Magnons, and we probably all descend from that. But we all descend from the Cro Magnons, and they have the same DNA. So it's possible that they were still connected even in that time period, and that this isn't just like a random act of kindness. And it is still a random act of kindness, but there's quite a bit more going on. And this is, you should check out his YouTube channel under that same name, Atlantean Gardens. He's done so much research into this. But this is the back of his book. Species with Amnesia: Our Forgotten History deals with events surrounding the sudden emergence of modern man, starting with the dawn of the Cro Magnon 35,000 years ago, leading up to our present time civilization. What are our true origins? If we don't remember our history, are we doomed to repeat our mistakes? And it talks about how he's an extremely renowned, I would call him an extremely renowned anthropologist, because this is not easy work that he's dug up. And I think that he's pretty much disproven the out of Africa theory, but not just him alone. And I'll get into his beliefs as well.
And a lot of us are kind of trained, and I was like this at one point, even as as soon as like a few months ago. We see the word Atlantis, or we see Mu, or we see stuff like that. We just filter it out because we think to ourselves, this is BS, this is made up nonsense, it's new age stuff. But we gotta stop doing that. I learned to stop doing
Hmm.
that and to start paying attention, because, guys, there is something here that changes everything.
And that's the thing. And also, it connects quite a bit more to Christianity than people would believe at face value. And this is just going to tail right into that, actually. The Egyptian kings list reveals that the total number of years covered by all of their god kings equals to 36,525, and that is the exact time period, pretty much, where the Cro Magnon man appears in the human fossil record. And I'm not sure, as far as the chronology of all of this, how accurate the dating is, but regardless, very interesting that the Cro Magnon cave paintings are the same as a sky map of Orion, Taurus, and the Pleiades. But this is very interesting. So, 28,000 years old, this was obtained from fossil bones discovered in Italy, and the results show that it is identical, that's very key here, identical to the sequences of certain modern Europeans. And this DNA sequence has remained static and unchanged over all of these years, which means that this is a fully modern individual who had larger brain capacity than the other archaic hominoids. And so they teach us the out of Africa theory, but that is 100%. Basically, I can't call anything impossible, so I shouldn't say that, but it is pretty much impossible that these haplogroups descended from African haplogroups, because once again, you just all you have to do is look at this. They don't carry any of these genes. So it's like this isn't just like a tiny mutation from changing locations. This is two different archaic hominoids that we're talking about here, and it's very controversial, but it's a fact. And you cannot deny that that's what's going on here, and
And let me see if I
you just
have
can't
this
argue
right
with
real
it.
quick. Let me see if I have this right. A haplogroup is a specific kind of pattern of DNA. Do I have that right?
Essentially, there's a lot of things. It's basically mitochondria DNA, and
Ah.
so it's the DNA of the mitochondria in each cell, which they didn't intend for it to be this way, but just by researching it, you can discover differences in human origin and races. So yeah, it is different. I don't want to say mutations because that's not entirely correct, but they're different genes basically that they might do similar things, but descendants of like L01 could be some African, and then descendants X would be a European, for example. So they'd be like it's more than just like your skin color is what I'm getting at. There's so many things that go into this that they probably don't even fully understand, but it it basically determines where you come from for like putting that in very layman's terms. I'm no expert, but I understand that for a fact. And in the ancient world, once again, just more connections where you're seeing the same exact thing. It's like literally the same exact thing all across. From Turkey is one that's very interesting as well. Sparta, I believe, I actually am very certain that Spartans have the same DNA as all of these people. Egyptians obviously do. Mesopotamia. And then we even see it with the eagle, which has, in my opinion, been so not subverted, but has been basically bastardized by a lot of different groups. But you see it, it comes from Babylon to Egypt, Rome, Germany. Now here we are in America. What's our symbol? Same thing, and it's also interesting to note that it has conquered the serpent, the American one, which we'll probably get into later with those bloodlines. But now this is interesting. So we're talking about the Rh negative DNA and the haplogroups. The European Basques, if you add this up, who has the alleles and the blood type, that's 95% of them are Rh negative. That's unbelievable. Like other European, I don't know really, considering how close Celtics are with the Basque, but I'd probably fall under this. Other Europeans are the next closest. That's only 40 or 56% that have the alleles or Rh negative blood, and obviously way less that are just pure. And then you can see the African Americans, likely from mixing with them, 7% have gotten it, and over a fourth of them have it. Native Americans, 1% of them do now, but 11% have the alleles. And then with pure Africans and Asians, it's like basically nothing. And that's very, very telling when you're doing this research because, once again, Rh negative comes up quite a bit. So you got to give that some merit. And the Basques are this pretty much guarantees that they're the originators of this, but there's a lot more evidence for that than just that. Um, and then this one, very interesting. A lot of people have been trying to disprove this, but King Tut's DNA is Western European. So they claim that half of European men have this DNA. I don't know if that's true, but it's a haplogroup that they found that is European. So that's an extremely large red flag that if it's a 99.6% match, basically what that's saying is that the Egyptians, or at least the royalty in that, were European.
And you in this
And
article that you just had up there a second ago,
yep,
if you
sorry.
notice in the writing, it says, despite the refusal of the Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, the infamous Zahi Hawass, who everybody hates because he won't tell us shit about what's going on.
Oh my god, and it's just it bothers me. It really does because they're trying to destroy all of our history and not just the world's history and civilization in general. They destroyed so many buildings. I just it blows me away that they were able to, over the course of like, let's say 150 years, basically erase this from the minds of so many people.
And this is
But
important because, in general, we think of Egypt as being kind of more of a Semitic, Arabic type of people. But if there's somebody there that's European, let alone King Tut, that changes everything. It means our idea of that part of the world during that time period was simply different, period.
and and it just having the wrong worldview, and when I say wrong worldview, I mean like something that denies facts. that's going to lead you down a horribly twisted worldview because of the fact that it's nothing's going to add up, and there's going to be a lot of conjecture and a lot of like what makes you feel good or what kind of seems right. That's why the DNA confirms this. A lot of people believe this and were called hacks, but now that the DNA is confirming it, instead of them getting their retribution, they just suppress it, and I don't think that that's fair for any reasonable truth seeker. But and this is going to Stone Age Europeans were the first to set foot on North America. So this was 10,000 years before the Siberian ancestors. That's what they're claiming. Certainly before. Don't know if 10,000 years is the exact number, but clearly before. And it's a remarkable series of several dozen European style stone tools found in North America. So it's a strange coincidence, but this is more than a coincidence. And I don't think that is a coincidence either, but you can't really deny this. These remains were carbon dated um, to be over 9,400 years old. And the genetic evidence that the Solutreans, which were Basque, they had the same haplogroup X. I believe U is connected to this somehow. Apparently, those were the people there. And you really never see that. Like they never talk about these findings, and they call the Indians the Native Americans the Redskins. But I only know of one type of people that turns reddish when they're tan outside all the time, and that would be like people that descend from Basques or the Cro Magnons. And this is another book that you guys can check out that shows you that people have put a lot of research into this. And it's a history book which ties together and corroborates the ancient histories of ancient Egypt, the Jews, the Greeks, the Romans, and the Irish in light of modern DNA discoveries and other scientific studies showing the Basques, along with the Spartans and Trojans, to be an ancient branch of the tribe of Judah. Now, I know that this is going to be super controversial, but even on the picture, you can see the Egyptian symbolism, the crown, and then this, whatever, the seal of Solomon, the Star of David, and a red hand. These are all very, very reoccurring symbols throughout many of these civilizations. And
And
it's a
and I
great
love
book.
this stuff because if you guys notice what that says, it says shepherd kings. Think about what that might
Mm-hmm.
mean in the context of that.
Yep, and once again, you a part of me and everybody, I think, that has done a lot of research kind of wants to write this stuff off as New Age, but really, it ties in way more with ancient stuff. Like we're talking like Old Testament and beyond. Like if we're going to talk about it in biblical terms, like this is, and it corroborates with it too. Like this isn't just one culture. That is what I'm trying to get at. This is a ridiculous amount of cultures that all do the same thing. um
If you think
and
about what these people are doing, they literally lie to us about everything. Don't be surprised that the history books themselves are faked.
yep. And this, I want you to take note of this too. This is about Tartarax, or Tartarax with two R's. What does that sound like phonetically and just language wise? That's Tartaria. To me, that is an obvious language connection. We'll get into the language connections too. But once again, super similar. And a bearded man of white complexion and one who is chapel worship, Crofts, and the Queen of Heaven. On went the Spaniards toward, I don't want to mess it up, but Kierva, or I'm very bad at butchering this. I've read all of this. I haven't like read it out loud, but poor naked prince found more. Essentially, found white complexions, and the Spaniards and the Jesuits were not Basques. The people that came here on ships, they were not like Basque Spanish people. They were a very different group of people, and you could call them serpent seed. I think is most accurate. But here's some more pictures that they'll never show you. This is the King of New England, Albion, and the King of Florida, and you can just see right there that both of those do not look like what were shown as like the Pocahontas type people in Disney movies. But and you can look at that and say, oh, well, somebody just drew that. Well, don't worry, we're getting there. Here's some more pictures. This is a literal picture. Nobody drew that. I'm sorry that the pictures are hard to see. I had to downscale them to fit it in the email. But as you can see, these people are not who, well, that this actually looks a bit more like the depictions. But once again, their genetics, these aren't like, this is going to offend a lot of people and make them very upset because people research this and think that they've like found the hidden truth and what they were lied about. And like, no, the Africans were not the ones who were all over the world and they show those fake like 12 tribes of Israel crap. Like, it's not true. But we'll get to that. We'll prove that with DNA. But the Redskins, like, somebody with that complexion is not going to be called a redskin or called white skin. It just does not make sense. And then this is literally proof right here, DNA proof. The Kennewick man is 9,000 years old. It's the Basque man, a Cro Magnon man, and it's the real original American. I don't want to play this video, but I could pull it up if we do have time at the end. They basically, and they put a beard on it to hide the jawline because the jawline really shows that it's a Basque. And because if they got rid of the beard, you could tell from the facial structure clearly what that is.
And for those of
And they
you
were,
out there that don't remember who the Kennewick man was, I'm pretty sure that's local to me here in Washington State. Very controversial. The Native American tribes did not want any studies or anything being done on this on these remains because
mm-hmm,
they said it was for religious reasons. But I think we kind of know the truth that it was probably because it would show that it wasn't necessarily what we think of as a Native American that was that who was the Kennewick man, and that raises a lot of
mm-hmm.
questions. And people have a lot of pride in their culture, and if you find out your culture wasn't first, well, it kind of sucks, so that there's some motivation there, just like in Egypt.
Exactly. And and it destroys their narratives that they want to teach us that anybody who has fair skin was a colonizing piece of shit that has no history and stole it, when the DNA says, wait a second, they had the same DNA as the people that were basically erased from history in North America. And you see a lot of people who are just like, oh, I'm Cherokee. And like, I know that I used to do this and now I kind of feel like an idiot, but I'd be like, yeah, like you look like a European. You're not a Cherokee. But you look at the DNA and it's like very, very likely that they weren't lying. But here's from a video. I can link all these videos at the end.
And
But
before anybody does get
anthropology.
offended by this, I just want to reiterate: this is we're talking about the people that actually lived in America back then. They were, they had different colors of skin.
Yeah,
Racism
it
is
wasn't
trying to,
just all
yeah.
one.
Racism is trying to act like it's everybody was all the same color. They're all the same. That's racist. That's not
Hmm.
respectful to
Yeah,
who is actually here.
and just to, I'm glad that you brought that up because just to clarify, these groups that I'm talking about make up about 25% of the Native Americans, I think. So I think it's over. Yeah, it's like 25%. It's a little bit over a fourth. I have something to reference that coming up, but it's not all of them. Like there's some that have Siberian ancestry from Asia, but exactly, they're trying to lump it all together, and that's the point. It's not all lumped together, and
Why rob us of
basically,
something so fascinating and so deep and so interesting? Why rob that from us?
exactly, and that's the questions that if you ask yourself, you'll start finding the truth. And you probably like a lot of it is a lot more hopeful. I'll say, like gives you a lot more hope in the world than a lot of the more alternative research stuff that isn't touched by the mainstream. And yeah, but it's some of it, like how it's all been destroyed, is going to be a very difficult topic to deal with. But basically, they argue that Navarre, and notice how Navarre sounds very similar to Nazareth, is a former Basque state, and they essentially they think that it was likely the cradle of Europe, or where they found the original Cro Magnon man. And this is some more. Before Atlantis was destroyed, there was an exodus of various adjacent lands, including the region of the Pyrenees. Thus, Basque distinctiveness in large measure equals the Atlantis effect. The distinctive Basque language is just a modern version of Atlantean. That's why it doesn't appear to have any known origins amongst any historical or ancient people. But I'll add to that, it connects to every single language. And I'll include this too. I know this picture's coming up. Their language is the exact, not the exact same, but the root words and all of the things that come from it. Like English descends from the Basque language, and that's brutal. Spanish descends from the Basque language. So many of these languages do. And the Phoenicians, I guess now is a good time to pull this up. Let's see, is this it? Here we go. So this is even misleading because this does not look like a Basque, but the DNA is the same as the Basques, as you can see from the haplogroup U, um, and it's one of the most ancient ones in Europe. But they had actually discovered that the Phoenicians were these same group of people as well, and this once again is similar to the Native Americans haplogroup. I believe that one or the other descends from them, but carries from Spain, Basque, Portugal, which is also Basque, England, Ireland, and Scotland, Celtic Basque. The U.S. and Germany. Germany is also Basque, and Native Americans, as you can tell, have that same DNA. It's remarkably rare in modern populations today, found in Europe at levels of less than 1%, which is most likely true, but like if you look at the haplogroup just U, there's a lot of people with the haplogroup U, and they're saying that this specific 5B is, but once again, or 5B2C, and it's not been in modern Lebanese samples. They don't find it. So once again, what I'm trying to get here is the same people that were there 2,000 years ago are not the same people there 3,000 years ago, are not the same people that are there today. People move, and especially these people, the Rh negative people, they moved all over the world over and over and over again. But once again, it's misleading. They don't really show how that would actually look, like even this article, but
It
doesn't matter
and people
because
out there,
they
we've
have
all,
the DNA.
yeah, we've all known about the Rh negative blood for most of our lives, but it was really just an afterthought. I know that's how it was for me. Nobody told me that, hey, there's something here related to history, and these Rh negative people might actually be from somewhere. I never knew any of that stuff. I just thought it was just, something that made people a little bit different. I did not know that it was that,
Yeah.
yeah, that you could trace this stuff back, and when you start doing it, man, does it open up a whole entire world.
Yeah, and it and then you see how connected and interlinked it is with the ancient civilizations, and you see how deep it goes. And just to keep on going here, it's noteworthy given the uniqueness of the Basque people and the connections that many have made between Atlantis and the Basques. For example, even though there's relatively little information provided in the Casey readings regarding the indigenous peoples of North America, the Native American Indians as they call them, a reading given in 1936 describes the past life of a woman among the Iroquois, those of noble birth, those that were of the pure descendants of the Atlanteans, those that had ritualistic influences from nature itself. And that's obviously not as scientific as the DNA, but very much lines up with the research that we're doing. And basically, the Solutreans are a group that hopefully I'll have time to touch on. I have some of that stuff at the end, but the Native Americans, the Cherokee, not all Native Americans, but the Solutreans, Cherokees, Seminoles, maybe all actually, I don't know, but the Cro Magnon skeletons and skulls found in America show you that they're the same people. And it's not who they've been telling you that it is, that the Cherokees, the Seminoles, the Mayans as well. Mayans are very important to this. And I have a map. But this is just a little excerpt that I pulled because I didn't want to pull the whole video up. But the Norse are an offshoot of they're different, but they do come from the Cro Magnon man as well. So I don't know if it's a result of mixing or if it's a slight different mutation or what, but basically what this guy is saying is that the Norse didn't kill the Asian type that is now viewed as the real Native Americans, but that the Basques and the Catalans are, which once again, Cro Magnon, you can read that as, are the real Native Americans. And now, due to this cover up, nobody talks about this hidden fact. All the Europeans are viewed as killers, and that's what we're taught, which is not true because of the Norse and their secret enemies, the Pharisees, really, to turn people into European, or to turn people on innocent people that really don't want to kill anybody. And obviously, it's not in the nature of the people that we see. And let's see if I can get a bit more into it. Here is what I was talking about earlier with the language connections. Basque goes into Germanic, it's into Celtic, a different form of Celtic, go all the way up into Anglo Gaelic, Franco Anglo. Now we're into English. This is the transition, and this is just one link. Like, and also you got to remember the story of the Tower of Babel or Babel. They say that they all spoke one language, Atlantean, and then the tower was struck down by the creator, and they all started speaking different things: English, Spanish, whatever else. And yeah, so this is just one. There's a ton more. Like there's some for Spanish, but I thought that the English one was pretty easy to follow. And that just shows you how the language morphs over time, and you're going to see some more very weird coincidences. This is a culture in Islam, actually. Did not know this, but apparently Islam, or the Prophet Muhammad, is described as having a red beard, and they actually dye their beards red, some cultures, to show, to honor the Prophet. And when you picture the Prophet Muhammad, I don't think anybody in the world pictures them having a red beard. But I just thought that was interesting. That's not as much of a connection to this. And then I just like this quote, but we can throw that in there. And I feel like it's kind of it sits in line with this quote to share this information. But this is interesting. So this is a typical skull, closer to the Cro Magnon, and then this is a Neanderthal skull, and they say that the Neanderthals died out, but it's pretty apparent that they're still alive today if you look at the skulls of certain families, such as Rothschild, that literally have the same Neanderthal skull. But if mankind evolved from the same African ancestor, then everyone's blood would be compatible, but it's not. And this is the Rh negative. Rh negative blood type suddenly appears right when the Cro Magnon appears. And basically, it begs the question: where'd they come from? And why does the body of an Rh negative mother carrying an Rh positive child reject her own offspring? Like, that's an insane phenomena. They don't accept it. And the thing is that humanity isn't just like one race. We all have different origins, and some of it literally without extra shots and medical procedures, you can't mix certain things without the mother or the child both being affected. And that's from his book Species with Amnesia. I showed the cover of that earlier. But the Egyptian kings list revealed that the total number of years covered by all of their god kings equals same amount as basically when the Cro Magnons appeared. And then I believe it showed that and that. And here is another language connection. Iberians, Iber is the Hebrews. Iberian was the land of the Hebrews. Iber-Aryans, the Hebrew Sumerians. Iberia in biblical times is now was it is Spain. They called it Iberia. There is an Iberia in the Middle East, but they just changed the names of these lands. It's not the same. And the languages will tell you there's so many more language connections than just that. And another thing to notice is they talk about all these people being oppressed, but none of these people have their own countries. None of them are allowed to have their own countries. They're all completely controlled by either the Spanish government or the British government, which, you know, how that connects to the Vatican and all of these secret societies. But none of these countries are allowed to exist on their own. And it begs you the question why. And all of these people have ridiculously high concentration of Rh negative blood. And this, I wish it was a bit bigger. I'll try and read it out for you. But This suggests that America was first discovered by Stone Age people from Europe. In human genetics, haplogroup X, this is super important, like I was talking about, it's the mitochondrial DNA, and the sequence of haplogroup X diverged about 30,000 years ago, about 5,000 years after the Cro Magnons appeared, into two subgroups, X1 and X2, which you can kind of see the circles and the squares. They break them up there, are found in Europeans and Native Americans. So the same DNA, literally the exact same DNA. Um, the main Native American DNA, the other four, which make up, I think, around 70%, are with East Asians or Eurasians, like I want to say like Turkey and Russia, Siberia. But X is not at all. X is actually pretty much only Western Europeans. And as you can see, it's the Cherokee, the Chippewa, the Iroquois. I know. I wish that this one didn't get so small, but you can see all of these cultures, all of these, and we're taught about them in school, but they aren't portrayed like this in the pictures that we see of them, which is super misleading. And all of them have the same DNA. And look at how like spread out they are too from ancient times. Like the people all the way over here had the same DNA as the people all the way over there, give or take like X1 or two, but they all originated from the same one. So you can see the point that I'm trying to make. And once again, you can't deny this. You can't look at this and be like, oh no, they were actually this people, because this is their DNA. You know what I mean? Like if I were to walk into a place and claim that I'm something that I'm not, I could scream it as loud as I want. It's not going to change the fact that my DNA is how it is.
Yeah, CMurph.
And
What is it called? That land bridge that supposedly all the Native Americans came over on.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh god, the Siberian thing. Yeah, the it's
yeah.
just complete garbage when you look at it. And well, and you know, maybe the geographic, let's give it to them. Maybe the geographics were like that. I'll play that game. That doesn't explain this, because these people come from a completely different side of the continent. You know what I mean? And I don't think they ever expected the mitochondrial DNA was, I think it was supposed to help with like diet and like determine what diets are good. They didn't expect that it would be able to determine where people originate from, which is what it did.
And let's
So
think
this
about
basically
how.
confirmed.
Sorry about that. Let's think about
No, no,
how.
keep on going.
Let's think about how terrible that is to suggest that these people are so primitive and so stupid that they can't build boats, that they have to come across an ice bridge.
Hmm. And that's a great point that you bring up, because the Basques and the Atlanteans are literally known as the seafaring race. So that like these people are known to build giant structures that are able to, whether or not you want to believe in the story, anybody does, like the Noah's Ark flood story or whatever, you know, like building these giant ships. It's just part of their culture. Like you look at even the Norse and the Vikings that are more recent, all of it is a seafaring base. So it makes sense that like if Atlantis had a catastrophe hit, some of them would flee this way, whereas most would flee closer to Europe, as you can see from that picture. But here's the proof that, excuse me, it just really should put all this to rest. I know that it won't, because people will hang on to their beliefs, but this essentially disproves it. So as you can see, the Native Americans, we covered that A, B, C, and D are East Eurasian. So we're talking Russia and Siberia. And a lot of the Russians are very similar. Like, I would say that a lot of these are similar to the West Eurasian ones. Maybe they had a Cro Magnon ancestor as well back in the day. I don't want to like speculate too much, but essentially U and X are big ones. And the fact that Native Americans are X, which is Western European, 25% of them, that's a huge, huge deal, because that means that like a lot of the people today who are looked at as like colonizing, like whatever assholes, were the original people here. So like think about how messed up that is. A kid could probably have no, for all I know, I've never done a DNA test, but for all we know, we could have this in us at some level, and we could have like indigenous ancestors and nobody would bat an eye. Not that it's that big of a deal to say like, oh, I have an indigenous ancestor, but just it's so dishonest, like the things that they're saying, because once again, you're not seeing any of these groups in the Native Americans. Like you're not seeing any of the L whatever.
it,
in their
yeah,
mitochondrial
and
DNA. So
one thing
you
that we have
can't
to
tell
keep in
me
mind,
that.
yeah, and one thing we have to keep in mind is pretty much, I don't know, like 99% of us are either mixed to a certain degree, or we're really a lot mixed. Pretty much everybody's mixed.
Yeah. hmm Yeah, I would say that th- that vast majority of people, if not everybody, except for like the most isolated Berbers or like Black Irish or even Basque County people, are like I think that everybody has some genetic variation. Like no one except for maybe these like elite families are like purebreds, like they want to say. But it's just the truth, you know. And this is gonna bring to light a lot more things and a lot more connections. And there's a great theory. This isn't proven or anything, so this isn't like the DNA, but there's a theory that the Garden of Eden and that these people, the Atlanteans, um, essentially originated from the North Pole. And there's other beliefs that they originated in Basque County, which is very probable as well, in like the Mediterranean area. But this one, I just wanted to bring it up because it's a very cool theory that they originated here and then came out that way, and that would also explain quite a bit, if that was their migration pattern. But nobody knows for sure because nobody is alive, and they destroyed the Library of Alexandria and various other resources.
And we
Uh,
got to ask
went over
ourselves why that
this
even
again.
happened. Why was the Library of Alexandria, which contained the entire knowledge base of the known world, why was it destroyed?
Yeah, and that's the important part. It's like they went into so much effort destroying this all over the world. It's just such a ridiculous joke that people don't bat an eye. But it's been erased from our consciousness too, so I can't blame everybody. But once you know, you got to understand. And so in India, they have a caste system, and the Deva Indians, uh, the Dravidians, I believe they're referred to as too. They're called the Brahmin class. They they were Aryans. They have the same culture, the same exact stuff as and most likely the Israelites too, which is going to once again, for some reason, the truthers get like. I use that word very loosely because if you don't change your opinion, like I've changed my opinion on this so many times given the evidence, but they don't want to admit this. And these people, they share the same DNA once again in ancient Egypt. And you look at the Hindu religion and compare it to the Egyptian and the Native American religions in Mesopotamia, super similar.
And it's
And
hilarious because we always think of the Hebrews and the Aryans are enemies, like they're mortal enemies, not the same thing.
yep, exactly. And that's the big, I think that's the biggest lie to come from, well, one of them. There's so many, honestly, it's hard to even say that, but there's just so, like this right here. I've never learned about this, but once again, someone sent me this, and I'm like, well, it's true. So there's Prince Madoc, who was a Welsh explorer who landed on the shores of Mobile Bay in 1170, and that's probably later than the haplogroup X, but he left behind the Welsh language. And now I want you to think about this. So Columbus sails to the New Americas or the New World, and they claim that he just comes into contact with these random people that have never been discovered before, and he could just communicate with them clearly, and like they can trade and just have. No, that doesn't make any sense. If they have a completely different culture and language, they'd basically look at each other like aliens, and that's just not how it was. Likely, all of their languages descended from Basque, like everybody else, in the Atlantean language. And if this is to be believed, which I'm pretty sure it's a historical fact, even though they say that it's a legend, and once again, most of the legends and myths that they tell us are true to some degree. They they would have the same remnants of the language, so it wouldn't be like you're running into like these random and like just the whole story. That whole story is just complete BS. But they were able to communicate with each other because at some level they had a similar belief system. And there's, once again, here's another book written by written by Dana Olson. It's The Legend of Prince Madoc and the White Indians, and the book tells the amazing saga of the 12th century Welsh seafarer Prince Madoc, whose name became renowned. And yeah, an assembly of recorded facts and physical evidence is presented that leads to the conclusion that he went deep into America and established, they say, the first prominent European colony. Definitely did something there, like established some colony. I would say it's probably not even the first, but yeah, we saw this. And they were described as more than cousins. And these Indians were Atlanteans, not the type that they told us before, just Mongoloid or I guess Siberian mixture with other things. He said, once again, they spoke exactly the same language with a slight difference in pronunciation, meaning they both spent, because you can see how like Nazareth, Navarre, Iberia, or like Saxony, Anglo-Saxon, Isaac's son, they're all like very similar, just slight different pronunciations. And it just basically comes down to the fact that they wouldn't have been able to understand each other, but their languages were the same. And once again, when people say that they're speaking the same language with slight differences in pronunciation, they have to share some type of common ancestry. So, I mean, and then note the line of Judah and the bloodline of David and Christ. In other words, the descendants of the true Judahites, and that in parentheses will piss people off too, but those descendants were Edomites who merely took on the religion centuries before Christ, meaning that the Pharisees were likely not of David's bloodline, which explains quite a bit. But once again, that book. And here's another thing that I noticed. I just saw this on Twitter, and I was just like, these people from the ancient Sumerians literally look like Basques that they show. It's just more statues. And here's more language connections from the Scythians. And this, you can see how Isaac's sons from the Bible slowly transitions over time into Saxons. In well, not even slowly, really. I guess that's just a couple of centuries, if that. And so Anglo-Saxons, you can guess where that comes from. Anglo's sons. And these are some Bible verses too. He said he sent them in, brought him in, and now he was ruddy. And withal, a beautiful countenance. Ruddy, you got to understand what that word means. And it's to blush, essentially. And only certain people can. Countenance, looks at arise, anoint him, for this is he. And then we say, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, this is David, who they all talk about, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of fair countenance. Fair. like this is so obviously apparent, like how they're describing it. And this is gonna hurt so many people. Well, not hurt people, but like it's the truth, you know. And I was really debating whether or not to even pull this up, but let people believe what they want. This verse has been misinterpreted so much, and I fell for this for years. So literally over a year of my life. And you look at this, and it says that Christ had woolly hair, and it doesn't say that he had woolly hair. Rather, it says that his hair was white like wool. Like they're describing the color, not the texture, or like saying that he had curly hair. And it also said that his head and his hair were white, and his eyes were a flame of fire. I'm not sure if that means that it's blue, but it's possible. And many people ignore this. And the verse doesn't say that he had black feet. And essentially, the word fine brass is a compound. It basically means whiteness or brilliancy, burnished. But obviously, you can tell that these people have never seen burnt brass before because it does not look like what they're implying that it does. And a fine brass once again. And look, I think that all people are, God created everybody for a reason, and everybody has a right to life, and nobody is like better than another person. But you gotta face facts, and you can't just like misinterpret spiritual texts in order to mislead people. It's just incredibly dishonest, and I figured that I might as well include it since it does connect to quite a bit of this. And then you can move right on to the group of Indo-European
And
peoples
the whole
that,
point of this
that
is to get to the truth. And the truth isn't necessarily,
exactly.
yeah, it's not necessarily going to be what we want to hear. And I had to go through this myself. I mean, I was hit with this information, and at first I was like, no way, this is bias, this is BS. But the more I looked into it
Yeah.
myself, I couldn't deny it. It's more important to know what's true and who we really are rather than come up with our own, cultural myths to explain our past history. That's robbing the entire
Yep.
world of who we are and where we came from, which is very important because we need that information to know what's going on now.
And it's just, and it's like the lessons and teachings that these people brought were so important. And here's another one from Forbes. The DNA reveals that these red-haired Chinese mummies came from Europe and Asia. Look at this. That's Celtic bone structure. But obviously the Orientals 100% were mixed in. I'm not trying to like say that, but the red hair, you see many of them with it now. Japanese, Chinese, they have they value fair skin like anciently in their culture, and they have many of these same DNA traits. And once again, they have this bloodline too. Like when we're talking about like the percentage of them with alleles, those would be the people, and yeah, probably it's because the Atlanteans mixed there, but the DNA is Celtic, or well, I guess Basque would be more likely because the Celts were probably in in Europe still, or maybe they traveled there. But regardless, it's the same DNA, and they with five different mtDNA groups, so it's a ton of layered evidence. I don't know what BS they're going to try and explain this for, or how they're going to try and explain their migration patterns. But this, just one look at it, it's probably the reverse. Like it probably came from that way. And but the important part is to note that their DNA was the same. And we'll see if I got some more here. I have so much stuff. I don't even think we're going to be able to cover it all, but I think that the picture's getting pretty clear at this point. Gotta wait for this to load. There we go. There's another Facebook group with Cherokee, and I can send this to anybody. I have so many information. This one is interesting. This is from Blavatsky, and this was before DNA had like proven this at all. So she must have had some type of information. Not a fan of her at all, but and once again, you see the same symbol also, and then the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. But it just talks about mitochondria DNA. I'll try and see if I can find where it brings it up. It's haplogroup X, once again, was discovered in nearly 25% of the Iroquois had. So maybe it was 25% of the Iroquois who had that, but it's present in 3% of the living Native Americans today. So 3% of people that call themselves natives. I would bet that there are a bunch of people with this that also have that DNA that once again probably originated there or had lived there for a while. But regardless, you look at the facts, and the facts are they were there. That these people were there and they contributed a lot. Like the Iroquois contributed a lot to that civil, not just that civilization, but just Native American culture in general. Just a huge, huge, interesting thing. And then the Solutreans, just a quick look at that. They they were also a very, very old group of humans living in Florida. They're dating it at 15,000 years ago. Once again, I can't say that I'm like 100% guaranteeing that these dates are accurate, even if scientists are, because it blows me away that people could date it. But regardless, they're extremely old, and it's before they're talking about the fishermen nets. and the historic artifacts that they found, which is similar to the spears that basically this is the important part. Now more discoveries have been suppressed because of politicizing. Native Americans came from Siberia, but the Solutreans were not, and they were in Virginia, or what we'd call Virginia now today. And yeah, the carbon dating says that it was super old, but regardless, these people, the Solutreans, have also been around here. And basically, starting point here, I think that the starting point could have been here, Atlantis, especially if you throw that in here, because you look at it, some of them go that way, some of them go this way. Probably most of them went to Europe, but yeah, it's literally just a cross for the seafaring race across the Atlantic Ocean, and they're right there, and that completely explains how they got there. Regardless, and this is going to be their ice theory. And once again, I don't agree with all of this, but the important things to note are the DNA and the architecture, along with like their technology and their cultures. If that's all the same, and additionally to the language similarities, you can pretty much say, if you have any type of common sense, that here it is. Yeah, the evidence of the stone tool making, the evidence of the DNA markers. Not as big as this. I'm not as sold on the ice flow data, but the cultural data as well. So those three are more than enough for you to understand that they aren't who they say. Like the Solutreans were Europeans, and they don't want to talk about it. We got a ton of stuff. Why is this doing that? We got a ton of stuff. Did it just delete? Oh, crap. I just have so much information that it's like it's unbelievable how suppressed it is, because there's so much physical data for what happened with Tartaria. These are just some messages that Eban sent me along with some links, but mentions a tribe from Scythia, which is the son of Hercules. Which, remember, this is they talk a lot about legends and all this BS, basically, that everything's a myth. Like the show The Smurfs is based on the Picts, who used to paint their skin blue, and they were called a blue race of people. Also, the movie Avatar depicts these people. They basically took real history. Here it is. The Picts were Basque. They take real history and they turn it into like these like Disneyfied like fantasy myths and cartoons, and it's pretty disrespectful once you find out the truth, because you see how they make it seem so like insane in the movies that like you could never believe it, but in reality, truth is stranger than fiction. And
And
here's
it
some more of
does
the
make you
picture of the sons.
wonder. It makes you wonder, what is the point of taking these people and turning them into a little bit of a joke like that? You have to wonder what sort of
Exactly.
mind control that is.
And that's the bottom line. I think that mind control is the perfect word for that, because it makes people like, it took me a long time to accept this, even with the amount of information that was thrown at me. And even like up until recently, I'm like, I still want to find more, because like I want to connect it all together and make sure that this is like coherent enough that people can see what I'm getting at,
And people have
and
to
like
ask
can see
themselves,
what's
how often have you heard the word Basque? How often have you heard the word Pict? How often have you heard the word Dravidian?
mhm.
How often have you heard the word Scythian or Scythian?
Yep, Scythian.
I
Yeah.
suck at pronouncing that,
I
but
can't even pronounce any of
that's
these.
how little we hear these words, and these are entire peoples. Like, why is this so shoved under the rug?
And that's the thing, and it's like it's so apparent that this culture has completely transcended a lot of I don't know. It's transcended a lot of the mainstream, and basically destroys that narrative, especially like the out of Africa theory, and like the whole like white people are just a bunch of like colonizing assholes who have no culture, when in reality it's looking like they had the original culture. In fact, it's not even looking like it. You can tell that this is probably about as old as it gets. Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and then Atlantis, along with the Native Americans. It doesn't get any older than that. And that's why they want to suppress it with the Tartarian buildings. And once again, the Picts, like who the Smurfs and all of them are based off of, they're closely related DNA wise to the Basques of Spain. And, Northern Britain, Celtic Spain, they're supported by many myths and legends. But you look at the DNA and it's like, these aren't just myths and legends, this is fact. And they've completely ripped it away from people to hide and they also want to hide the connection to the Israelites, and they want to hide the connection to the ancient Sumerians, and they want to hide the connection to the Egyptians. Like how it's said that one asshole was trying to completely, like, not publicize the DNA of King Tut. And it's like, you can tell that the people do not want to accept this for whatever reason. And none of these people, like, that have high populations of them, they don't have their own countries anymore. Like, even some of the most, like, oppressed countries in the world, like I would say Haiti is up there. They still have their own country. You know what I mean? Like, they're like relatively autonomous. I'm sure that nothing in this world can like fully escape like the Rothschild banking tentacles and stuff like that. But they have their own land. Like Ireland still does not have their own land. None of them do. So it's almost as if there was a war for Tartaria and they lost and they're not getting it back for whatever reason. Nikola Tesla's technology also connects heavily into this. And the Basque and the Irish, once again, very, very similar. And another thing, before I delve into that, let me see. This is something that I didn't know about until like literally a few weeks ago, and it blows me away because I knew that I had ancestors that were serfs, but they talk about how like, like I should feel bad for slavery and all this crap. And like I trust me, I do empathize with anybody, but like the people who owned those slave ships were not my ancestors and were likely not the vast majority, like 98% of Europeans' ancestors. But essentially, the trying to find where it says it, but the Irish slave trade began when 30,000 Irish prisoners were sold to the New World, and 70% of the population were Irish slaves in that uh, Antigua and Montserrat. But this is from 1614 to 1651. Over 500,000 Irish were killed by the English, and another 300,000 were sold as slaves. And Ireland's population literally was basically turned into a third of what it was in a single decade. And then you can see why their families were ripped apart, similar to basically any slave trade. That they're taking their wives and children across the Atlantic. So it's like this is not something that is, and this is the point that I'm getting at. Many of the people are going to avoid calling them what they were, and they were slaves. And mostly women and children were sold to Barbados and Virginia, and they're transported to the highest bidder. So it's like the slave trade was just beginning for the African slave trade as well, and they were more expensive to purchase and were treated far better oftentimes than their Irish counterparts. But you can't say that. You know what I mean? Like if you say that, the whole like Twitter death mob will come to you and like just like start crying about who wins the victim Olympics. I'm not saying that any's better than another, but it's like you can't just ignore this. And this goes into it very deep. And if anyone black or white believes that, but basically it's a subject worth remembering, not erasing from our memories. And why is this not even private schools are teaching this? It's seldom discussed. Nobody, like, I didn't know about this, and this is partly my history. And it's like many of the memories merit more than a mention from an unknown writer. Or is their story one that there's the English pirates intended, that the Irish slave story, or that the Irish story in general is utterly and completely destroyed and makes it disappear as if it never happened. And none of these people made it back to their homelands to like tell their people what had happened and tell their culture. They're lost slaves, and the history books conveniently forgot, they say, but I think that we both know that they didn't forget. And I'm sure that you look at the Basques and various other cultures and you'll find the same stuff where they just completely remove history as to what happened. And it's like they're connected to the Cro Magnons, so they built so much, and yet at the same time, eh, they've been reduced to like nothing in the modern day. And like since like the 1800s, I'd say, is when the changes really occurred. And it really begs the question on top of the mud flood, Like, why did they go to this extent of destroying it all? Like, what secret esoteric knowledge between these symbols have they like completely removed from our history and are likely using for their own nefarious means? Because they steal the symbols, as you can see. Just very, very thought provoking.
Yeah, that's a very deep topic that's almost kind of like a subset of what we're talking about now is this symbolism thing. You would think that we could look at symbolism and
Mm-hmm.
figure out who is who, where they come from, what they believed in. But once we get into this stuff,
Yep.
holy crap, it's just like you're saying, it's almost as if some people have been going around infiltrating different cultures and actually stealing their cultures and their symbols. Like, what the hell's going on
Yeah.
here?
And that's awesome that you bring that up too, because I almost forgot to say this. That has been the reoccurring theme in every one of these ancient civilizations. Every single one. It's you go to Atlantis and you look at Plato's writings, but you don't just have to look at hers. You can look at Blavatsky's or any of these like esoteric secret society people. They say that it started off as a pure, like incredibly, they sometimes describe it as like divine people that have amazing architecture and culture. And then at some point, whether it's through like interbreeding or like deviancy, they get like infiltrated and then they suddenly lose their culture and they lose their what makes them great essentially, and then due to natural catastrophe or themselves they collapse. Then you go on to ancient Egypt and Sumeria, both of them same story of all this great stuff, and then out of nowhere it's like the civilization just kind of like collapsed on itself. And then you get into more recent times and you have ancient Greece, which they call the cradle of Europe, which isn't true. It's not the first as ancient Egypt, because like the Mediterranean, North Africa should really be called like the South Mediterranean, given like the DNA connections and the culture. So that culture clearly just moved up a bit to the Greeks and the Spartans and Athens. But and then look, it's like great civilizations that rot from within, and then the most famous one is Rome. You know, a great civilization that just rots from within and gets almost infiltrated. And if you look around to like even England, you could say it happened to, but you look at America and that's the same thing that's happening right before our eyes today that not very many people want to point out, that we've been essentially infiltrated and are getting subdued from within. Like our enemies are not this like crazy culture from outside. It's people within our own country undermining it. So and it's just the same story played out again and again.
And a lot of us think we have it all figured out. We think we know, oh, it's Illuminati, it's this person, it's that person, it's this group, it's that group. But the more you learn about this stuff, the more you learn how friggin' complicated it is and how hard it is to actually understand who's the bad guy. You really have to just keep. I'm not sure I'm even there yet.
Yeah, it's just it's just the biggest can of worms to like open up and deal with, and just and just go, and it comes back to like this stuff. It's Cro Magnon versus Neanderthal. I could send the picture, but essentially Stalin, Hitler, and all of these leaders, I've sent it to you before. They have the same skull structure as Rothschild, and they're Neanderthals. They say that the Neanderthals died out, but there are Cro Magnons and there are Neanderthals, and it's of their esoteric beliefs themselves that they descend from Cain, these like elite secret societies, and then you have the fake Merovingian or whatever, however you pronounce their stupid name. They believe that the whole Da Vinci Code crap, but they believe that they're the Canaanites, and then the Cro-Magnons would be the descendants of Adam and
Oh,
Eve.
the Merovingians.
Merovingians, that's it, yeah. And they're, I think I'm very certain actually that there was that bloodline itself had been usurped, because you look at the Stuarts of England and the royal family now, the Windsors, are not the original royal family, like of that they don't have any connection to biblical blood like they claim. But at some, and same with the Romanovs, you know, you look at the Bolsheviks and they just they got rid of that family, you know. And same with France's monarchs, all of the original rulers had been usurped and replaced by essentially the Canaanites, and that's what we're dealing with now. These like that they and even Atlantis. I just saw a video today that I didn't know, and there was talk about the 10 Atlantean kings, the 10 crowns. They reference this a lot, and there was a council of 10 before it fell, literally like towards the end of it, the 10 Atlantean bloodlines that I would place so much money on that those are the same bloodlines as what we know as like the Jesuit and Illuminati bloodlines of today. And they probably led to that collapse of Atlantis for whatever reason, just like they did in Egypt and in Rome and in anywhere that you want to look at.
It's like
Germany, Russia.
this group that wears many faces, many masks.
Mm-hmm. And they call them they often refer to themselves as the serpent seed, so it's not even like I'm like talking down. I'm using their own writings. That's what they want to call themselves, and it connects to Lilith and the serpent in the Garden of Eden story. Whether or not you take that as fact, that's what they believe. You know what I mean? Like that's what's so crazy about it. Like regardless of like what we choose to like accept as fact, these people have so much control, and that's what they believe. Like they believe that they descend from Cain. It just blows me away, and that explains why they hate people with Rh negative blood. And honestly, you think about it, they pillaged like the Mongrels and the Barbarians and the Khazarians. They all pillaged and raped and destroyed so many people. And you see the Bible talking about purity of bloodline and all this stuff, and not just the Bible, but just even common science with like Rh negative DNA and them rejecting it. How much of the bloodline do you think was destroyed because it's technically recessive from like rapes and pillages and like you get what I'm getting at? Like they essentially like probably destroyed because there's theories that like 40% of the world was Rh negative or Cro Magnon
Yeah,
essentially,
it's a
and that would mean
genocide.
that a lot more.
It's a racial
Yeah, and
genocide. It's complete
and
racism. It's
now
a
it's
racial genocide.
yeah, and you're just saying it how it is, and they now it's less. I think it's around 10%, if that. So I mean, like that literally shows they killed off 3/4 over the course of probably thousands, hundreds of years at the very least. But that's like that's what it's getting at, and this is just I don't know if people are going to read this or have been reading this, but this just once again connects to the languages are the same. This is from the book The Secret of Atlantis. The inhabitants of the Mediterranean region are related to ancient Basque, and the original Aboriginal tribe, the Oshi, and then you can look at genetics and the racial stock. The Iberians of ancient times are the Basques. The Basques are descendants of the Cro Magnon, and DNA proved him right. Like I had to add that because DNA, like this was a theory that is now proven fact, and they suppress it. Like, and once again in his book, he said that there are support from many sides, and then DNA proved that he was right. Like, and we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the differences between Cro-Magnons and other archaic hominids. But once again, here we are, and they say that King Arthur was a myth, when in reality, King Arthur was a real person. These are messages from Ebon, most of the writing, but and the quotes from Brooks. Arthur was a prince from the tribe of Britons and the son of Uther. Pendragon, a title given to a sovereign paramount over many kings. So this is like the concept back to like biblical kings, Israelite kings, like the divine right. And then it's like it's no wonder that the imposters want you to think that mythology is not real, because King Arthur, once again, was a very prominent figure,
And
and
then
they
we go back
supplanted.
to what you were talking about earlier, how these people are no longer in control of the area that they used to live in. So that kind of answers the question of why this history is so obfuscated.
Mm-hmm. And all of those ancient sites, like in Egypt, you can't like go. And many of these places, like okay, and if we want to get like really esoteric, we can't go to Antarctica and we can't go to the North Pole. And like you saw some of those pyramids, and there's another YouTube channel called When the Buildings Cried on YouTube. And if anybody looks up their Antarctica videos, I sent it to you of like the exploding buildings that they call mountains. Like they're literally like demolition jobs that are huge. Who in the world built that? You know, like it had there like the legends and myths of giants had to have some truth to them, because it's like these structures are incredible. Like they're the size of mountains. And like it's almost like if normal people were building that, then they'd build it like how we build skyscrapers today, where like normal people could move around in it, you know, and just have like a ton of floors and like normal set. But like these are giant rooms, like giant hallways, amazingly huge steps, and it just defies all logic. And that connects to another thing, but the Basque culture has there are giants and there are big heads in Spanish, and there are different connections to that as well. But I don't. They've also covered up fossils of that, I'm aware of, but I don't know if there's like DNA evidence linking it like how there is here. And this is just more proof that they were there before Columbus, which is very obvious. And there was a linguistic link between the Basques and various Native American tribes, and puts forward that the Basques were originally American, which is actually kind of a Mormon belief that the Bible occurred in America. And I don't know if that's the truth, but they definitely knew something. You know, he was a high-ranking Freemason. The I'm forgetting his name. John Smith, was it? The Mormon guy,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, and that that begs another topic. The fact that why is it that the Mormons are closer to this than our history? It's
Yeah, and
embarrassing.
it literally is, because and once again, I don't think that that's like undisputed fact. You know, like you hold the Mormon Bible there, but why in the world is like the Book of Enoch explaining this crap better than our mainstream anthropologists and like our mainstream geneticists when they have this information? Like all I had to do was basically read some of these theories and then piece a couple of them together, and suddenly it's like, wow, these aren't just similarities, this is the exact same thing. And this is mythological links between the Armenians and the Basques. And it's interesting that Armenia and Georgia are neighbors. And you look at many of the names of U.S. states, and even sports teams like the Saints and the Vikings are Basques, the Redskins are Basques, the Yankees, the Cowboys, they were the original Cowboys. There's so many in like sports where they have these like little like kind of like told you, like I don't even know, like they're just kind of shoving truth into your face just slightly, just a little bit, like, you know, like they're still throwing the truth out there. I'm
It's
forgetting
like
one, just one of the sports teams.
we have things in front of us, like what you're talking about, that seem to allude to more cultural knowledge than we have. It's there, yet it's like it's filtered and watered down, and we're just getting the little trace remnants of what actually existed.
Exactly. It's just I don't know, it's so much to digest. And then you look at even like some of their theories kind of allude to this, but then they cut it off, and it'll throw in some like 5%, 10% bullshit. And that is what it is, you know? It's like they can show you the like what I had pulled up earlier with all the DNA links, and then it's like very apparent that we didn't all originate from Africa. And then they'll just like end with all that information and be like, our theory is that we all came from Africa. And it's like, this doesn't make sense. Like the evidence that you just presented, but I don't think many people are going to question someone in authority.
And that's again, it's racist to say people came from Africa and their skin lightened and their features changed. I mean, come on, what is that mainstream scientific viewpoint actually saying, and why is that okay with us? And where's the actual racism?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing. And then they say like now it's white people can't be racist. And it's like I wonder why they're pushing that narrative now. because it's or white. You can't be racist against white people. Sorry, it's like the not that even all white people are like once again, this goes deeper than skin. Like there are very many fair skinned people that would be serpent seed and would not fall under this. So like, or not even fair skinned, but I guess you'd call them white, if you just looked at them down the street. So like it goes like most of the people don't understand this goes far deeper than skin and like hair, even though that's like a part of it and the traits are there. But the Cro Magnon of all this is Navarre and Nazareth have like another incredible language connection, which makes me think that Jesus of Nazareth, or his true name is Yahusha, but the Christ from Nazareth um, may have come from Navarre, and I don't even hear that theory brought up much outside of what Ebon's shown me, but there's a whole lot of evidence for that, and just there's a ton of these videos that are all included where you have the Solutreans, Native Americans, basically what we talked about, just evidence of them, the conquest of Navarre and the history of that, and then the Phoenicians. And Hyperborea is super connected to Tartaria, and that's connected to the Atlanteans as well. I'm not sure if they predate Atlantis. I've read very conflicting stuff. I need to do more research, but Hyperborea is a super interesting culture, and just it's not even mythology. It's probably true, but they were considered divine beings. You can just see from the pictures that just right there, there's a lot of symbolism just in those writings with like the sun rays around
And
the head and like the snake.
that gets into this new age label once again. A lot of us were
Mm-hmm.
programmed to think, oh, anything that says Atlantis, Hyperborea, words like that, Mu, all those type of Lemuria. We think of those words as
Yep.
new age. That's satanic. It's a cult. It's lies. We need to stay away from it. But unless you can get outside of that box, your learning is going to be frozen. You're not going to learn anything new. You gotta you gotta like humble yourself a little bit and be prepared to eat a little crow and admit that you're wrong in
Mm-hmm.
order to learn things and find the actual objective truth.
And that's where you earn true respect, because all of this that I'm presenting today, I would have completely said was BS probably a year ago. And now that I learned that I was the wrong one, like my understanding of history was incorrect. And it's not new age stuff, because this coincides with the Bible. Like Noah was he had to have been Basque, like David obviously was described as this. So they were connected to these civilizations, and you wonder like how these ancient prophets could have so much like knowledge, not just connected to like typical like let's say typical Christianity or Catholicism, like mainstream, but this is like so much deeper. Like it goes beyond like even like what the mainstream puts it. Like this is like the true history. Like this isn't new age. This is but the new age has taken it obviously and subverted it for their false deities or whatever they're looking for, and they've completely corrupted it, which makes this research very hard to do, because you look up stuff about Atlantis and it's like outside of like certain secret society members, you're going to get a lot of BS, and unless you have things like genetics or the architecture and language connections that are like tangible enough that you can make the connections, it's going to be really hard to decipher what is new age crap and what is truth, because like the whole reptilian thing is that's super hard, like how like the deciphering the truth from the disinfo with that is like very insane, because it could be like some people would interpret it as like metaphorical, other people would say that that's a real phenomena,
I
and
think that I think that whatever it is, this reptilian thing, and I'm not even gonna pretend to have it down because you're right. There's so much disinformation and outright lies and confusion surrounding the topic of these reptilians. Are they possessed humans? Is it their blood? Are they actual shape-shifting reptiles? Blah 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 blah. But somehow it ties into this Rh negative stuff. It's not that the reptilians are
mm-hmm.
Rh negative like we might initially think, but it seems almost like whoever these reptilians are, or whoever they represent, or whoever they're behind, are hunting these Basque people.
Yeah. And sorry, I just forgot to pull this up. But this is just a diagram of what you're talking about with the Rh negatives. This is what happens when an Rh negative mother mixes with has an Rh positive fetus. Like if they were to whatever have sex with a Rh positive person and their baby becomes positive, her antibodies attack the baby. Like it's like this is the only group of people that I know that have a built-in defense mechanism to essentially like kill their own like they're essentially trying to keep their bloodline pure by killing their own fetus, oftentimes at the expense of the mother. Like this can be dangerous for both, and I know this is true because not just because of all the evidence, which is my parents, one's negative, one's positive, and my mom is negative, and she had to get shots. I think it's like the first baby is okay, but the second one isn't, or maybe I think that's how it is. But the this can be extremely dangerous, and no other group of people has that happen to them. You know, like where it's like it's a built-in. I just can't accept this. You know, like your body will attack itself rather than like change the bloodline. It's just unbelievable because you know what I mean. Like if you're like type A and someone else is type O, it's not like your baby's gonna attack itself. But if negative and positive, apparently that's important enough. And once again, you go biblically, their blood they emphasize the purity of bloodlines. Like there's the whole beginning of the gospel where it talks about how Jesus descended from um, all of the lineages, like through David and Abraham and Noah and all of this down to him, like to prove that he was of this bloodline, the messianic bloodline. And the only group of people that would really care about that would be Rh negatives. You know, like I don't really think that any other group of people is like freaking out about something like that, except for the elites. But once again, then that's the Canaanites, and they have their own reasons for that. And it connects to like the latent spiritual potentials too. Maybe give this a look. Rh negative traits. There's a lot of BS. Um,
CMurph, would you say that the Salem witch trials, or the witch hunting, was related to Rh negative?
I need to do more research on that, but honestly, from what I know, I would I would not be surprised in the slightest if those were Rh negative people and they had latent spiritual abilities, like they could see things that others couldn't, or they could have psychic vision. You know, like all of the stuff that you would associate with it. And then the Jesuit type people had to suppress them because if they want to control people, they can't have that. And that's honestly what it seems like. Because you know the who knows who are like actually the like frog like boiling like crazy witches and who are just people that have a higher connection to like the true creator and who have like higher spiritual capabilities that aren't like necessarily evil, you know. And it sounds like the people killing people for that were more evil. So I think that it's, and I'm not an expert on that, but yeah, I think that that's probably huge because they killed everybody with Rh. Like the Spanish Inquisition, I know was like that. They killed the Rh negatives and the Celts and the Basques, the Basques specifically. But so the Salem witch trials, I would bet is the same thing. And then like this is a lot of this is kind of like new agey, like it's like prone to alien abductions and stuff. Like just probably more like demonic entities or like interdimensional beings contact them or like try and mess with them. But you look at this and it's like Rh negative is the Israelite blood, the Atlantean blood originally, and Hyperborean, all that. And it's like you look at it and it's like lower body temperature, predominantly blue, green, or hazel eyes, red or reddish tint. Also blonde hair is another one. Tend to be healers, higher IQ. And this one's interesting, an extra rib or vertebrae. Many of them have like an extra bone on their spine, which is it. Like a lot of them have back problems. There's a ton of stuff here, and this is probably not even close. Ability to disrupt electrical devices. And another thing to mention is these can all, like, you can be an Rh positive person and have these traits if you possess the alleles. Like if you're positive but you have Rh negative blood in you, so like you can kind of be cloaked, and like they don't know for certain if you do or don't. But I'm sure if you're like Rh negative, then it's obvious. And the amount of Rh negative kids that go missing, and like as I'm saying this out loud, like I guess you're right. Like the Salem witch trials probably has to be that way because it's just adds up and connects to all of this. But and then increased psychic and intuitive abilities. I'm sure they hated that. Like just a bunch of crazy stuff.
And there's people like on YouTube that are saying, I'm Rh negative. I'm being watched. They're watching everything I do. They're stalking me. There's
Yeah.
UFOs stalking me. What's going on there? Why are all these people with negative blood? Why are they being harassed by this shadow government? What the hell is going on?
Yeah, and there's so much disinfo too. It's like, oh, they're aliens. Like these are like mixed extraterrestrial like beings that have no monkey gene in them or whatever. And it's like, well, I just first of all I don't believe that, but it's like once again what you're saying, why in the world are they the ones that are being targeted like by like psychic attacks, not and like literal physical government stuff like gang stalking and all this crazy shit that like once again, like I wouldn't unless some of the crazy crap that's happened to me recently happened. Like if that didn't happen to me, I don't think I would have like believed a lot of this. But like I've experienced some weird shit, and now it's like you connect it to the bloodlines, and it kind of becomes clear as day. Like the amount of Rh negative kids that go missing. I know the Madeline McCann story, whether or not that was what they tell us it was. Just there's so many of these stories where it's like they are going after Rh negative people and going after them with like vigor.
Well,
And once again, they've wiped them out.
for the Spanish Inquisition to be what they say that it was, where it's like, oh, you accept Jesus or I'm going to twist your nipples off type of stuff, or I'm going to stick you in the Iron Maiden. I mean, that stuff sounds stupid. It makes the Catholics sound like they're idiots, and they weren't idiots. They're extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
Whatever
And the
that,
Catholics wanted to subvert it.
yeah, it's all a cover for what they were really doing.
And then it kills two birds with one stone because they do not want people to connect like the messianic prophecies and stories to these ancient like Atlantean and like Lemurian, Egyptian Messiah, like even like the Emerald Tablet stuff. Like they all talk about a character, and I would say that the Catholic Church has probably done as good of a job at like destroying that idea for an institution that's supposed to like support it as anyone else. And it's like that's the perfect cover story too for it. Is just to be like, oh, we were killing them for Christ, and it's like you're doing the exact opposite, and you're probably killing people that came from a similar bloodline to him. Like it's just unbelievable. And once again, you're right. It just lines up with the Salem stuff, and then the Native American genocide. You find out, oh, the people that were killed there, they also shared this DNA, and their whole history has been suppressed. Like all of their histories have been destroyed, and it's like it is the saddest thing.
And then you have this thing where they're not only killing these indigenous peoples or these Basque peoples or Rh negative people, but they're also stealing their cultures and they're stealing their books and their symbology and
Mm-hmm.
locking it away in a vault somewhere underneath the Vatican. It's like they want this
Yeah,
information, but they don't want a stupid poor masses to have it.
exactly. And it's like, why did they remove the Book of Enoch in that same like train of thought? They completely removed what explains pretty much all of this. And they completely just were like, no, that one, even though other canonical Bible books reference it and reference Enoch, they're like, yeah, no, we're just not going to include that one because, like, once again, I think that they have, I don't know, I just think that everything that they're pushing has tried to water down the truth enough that like they can control people. And I feel bad because there are a lot of people that are probably very close to the truth, but are just a bit off on some things where it's like it's a lie, you know? Like with the Jordan Sather type, like I'm sure when they talk about like RH negative and stuff, it's gonna be like blue avian bird people that like came down from a different planet, and it's like they're on the right track though. I mean, it's like okay, like they're the RH negative is important, but you end up being so wrong, and then that ties right into it. And the elites claim to be RH negative when they're not. They're haplogroup J, which is once again not RH negative. The mitochondrial DNA doesn't come from that. So it's like they demonize it too by pretending to be it while obviously not descending from the same people.
Whatever
So
they're doing, they obviously want to carry forth that mystique. Like it makes them feel good to imagine that they're from the Basque culture
mm-hmm.
or they're RH negative, but really it's stolen. And I think that there's quite a few
Yeah,
sources that will tell you that the royals are not really the true.
royal.
Yeah, essentially yes, they're not the true
Just
royals.
aren't. Yeah, and just that, and it's funny because they you look at the history that they have stolen and like just who they identify as now and who they were like who the Canaanites identify as now versus who they were in that same book, and like and then you don't even have to go for that because they steal all of the history too, right? Like you like what you said, like the royals, they claim that they're the British royals. Like no, you're not the fucking British royals, like you're not the Stuarts. And it's just it's hilarious.
They're not
It's
the
not even hilarious. It's kind of sad. But
they're not from King Arthur. They're not that true
mm-hmm.
British royal bloodline. They're not from the original people and King Arthur who was RH negative.
Yep. And then they basically have kind of a free pass, not a free pass, but it really helps them to just go and screw over any group of people they want and then deflect the blame to another group of people. You know, because you got to think when Khazaria converted to Ashkenazi, you know, all of that stuff, they they were probably able to deflect blame from people, like from themselves to other people when they would do things, and then obviously that got its own like stigma, and then they had to move on, and then they obviously usurped England, and it's like, do you think that the average like English or Welsh person supports what like the Windsors are doing? They probably don't even know about it, but if they did, they wouldn't. But it's very easy then to just blame them. Same thing with what they did to the Native Americans. They erased them out of history, say, no, they were this group of people, and then they were the colonizers, and now you've suddenly gotten everybody to browbeat and attack the people who were really the ones who were oppressed, or at least oppressed along with them, at the very least.
And they tell
So
us
it's like
like
the.
they tell us a lot of these Native Americans died from disease and stuff like that, but it's so obvious that they were just killing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, how many? Look at the just the. This is well, I guess it'd be kind of connected to the Native Americans, but the Irish, that their population from 1.5 million to less than 600,000, like 500,000 people, they wiped out 2/3 of them, and we don't get taught about this in school.
That's
But yet,
insane.
like the Holocaust is going to be like reverberated over and over again, despite quite a few qualms. And it's like, I'm not saying that like anything did or didn't occur. I'm just saying like they're picking their narratives, and they leave out like the gulags in Russia and what the Bolsheviks did to the Christians, and not even just the Christians, all Basque people really, and like the gypsies, that probably some of the gypsies weren't just the Roman gypsies, like the Irish travelers. They just bundled them in with the same haplogroup J, even though they're probably very different people. And there's another, and China too. All the millions of people that were destroyed and killed, and all their cultures erased from the Cultural Revolution, but they don't talk about them. And it's like those are the things that what I've learned is like what they don't talk about is what you should research, because there's always so much more.
Yes, yeah, that's true. And the thing with China is that those people are the most oppressed people on the planet right now. Possibly, they're pretty much slaves. They're not allowed to know
Hmm.
anything.
And it's sad with like the social credit score and all of that. And another thing is a lot of Chinese and Japanese as well will have fair skin and reddish hair. And that, now that I've done this research where the Celtic mummies were found in Chinese royalty, it's like, wow, those people probably descended from like the Atlantean Oriental mix, where like now they're probably just being worked for like pennies and doing nothing. And the same thing with the Irish, and the same thing with like many people really throughout the world. And it's just like it's really sickening to imagine that like those were once like such great people, and what they've been slowly reduced to over the course of
Yeah,
a couple hundred years, really.
there's that saying, the luck of the Irish. That's something to do
Hmm.
with the magical psychic abilities of these RH negatives.
Yep. Yeah, and the Irish. I relate to it a lot, obviously, because I have like heritage from it. But the Basques, I think, were the ones I'd never even heard of it, and that's probably the ones that we all come from. Well, the Atlanteans really, but like the Basques are probably some of the most pure, and it's like just super strange to me that they don't even have their own like you know what I mean? Like they don't have their own area. Oh, you have Basque County, that's it. And like
Yeah,
Ireland, like you
exactly.
can't have your own country.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just
these people have been hunted, oppressed. They barely even exist anymore. To turn around and say that these people are racist who are being hunted, and
yeah.
it's insane. It's the
Well,
ultimate lie. It's the ultimate hypocrisy.
yeah, if you put red hair, blue-eyed people on like if they were an animal and not a human, they're less than 2%, they'd be classified as an endangered species. But since they're human, nobody gives a shit. It's like very weird that nobody like bats an eye at that.
And there is that like stigma if you have red hair. It's almost like,
Yeah, the redheaded stepchild, like go
yeah,
fuck yourself.
exactly. I mean, a lot of red-haired people aren't even, bad looking or anything. Like, there's red-haired women that are very beautiful, yet we associate red hair. Oh, you're ugly because you have freckles. Like,
Yeah.
where does that come from?
And like and even you look very recently, like this is like way post slavery, into like the 50s and 40s and 1940s, there's the signs like no Irish need apply and shit. like
Yes.
like they weren't considered white. And like once again, that really speaks volumes as to like the Cro Magnon versus Neanderthal. Like I don't want to say like pale or fair skin, because both of these people can be tan. Like it would surprise people, I think, to see how like North Africans and Berbers and stuff like can look like. But um like the Neanderthal and Cro Magnon thing, the Neanderthals are the ones that have been Jesuits and colonized and destroyed everything, and they hate the Cro Magnon whites, you would call them today. And it's funny because the Neanderthals shapeshift, and like maybe literally and metaphorically, but metaphorically in that like they're white when they want to be like crypto and just go in and like infiltrate that society. But then when they're trying to like basically like sneak into others, they're like, no, we're not white. Like we would never be white. You know what I mean? Like they shapeshift their identity
It,
as it suits their
and
needs.
even
And
the
it's just it's incredible.
even the concept of Neanderthal, it seems very obfuscated and very cloudy. And there's even evidence that possibly Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals had fought in the Paleolithic era,
Yep.
which really lends more evidence to this whole thing. It's like, what's going on here? Is it an ancient war?
Yeah, and that's what it is, because all of the ancient texts basically describe it as that, just a huge ancient war. And um and it's still going, like once again, like people want to call this like new age stuff, but look at the Bible and the war between the Israelites and the Canaanites, and that is Cro-Magnon versus Neanderthal. That's that story played out once again. And I see how that can like get people a bit angry. because of all the propaganda that has basically been thrown around with that, but it's just a fact, you know?
Yeah, people want to take everything super literally, but sometimes it's almost better to just kind of look at where things point. That gives us, I think, a more overall truth rather than arguing about specifics. If we just kind of look at where things point, I think that gives us more objective answers.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really not about like for because look, it doesn't matter who you are if like you're still going to be a shit person. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying that like just because you're born in like this bloodline you're destined to be like an asshole or you're destined to be like a great person, but it's just the erasure of history and the themes and patterns. But with the Neanderthal thing, I just sent this to myself. Take a look at their skull structures. This is not like the Neanderthal pictures that I'd shown earlier. Maybe I can get that side by side. But they they have a completely different skull structure, completely different eye sockets, completely different noses. Like look at this, and then look at the Peru skull of their leaders, and then that's more Cro Magnon right there. But you can see it is not the same. Like very very different genetically. Let me see if I can. It might take a second to pull up, but you get what I'm getting at. It's like this is just apparent, you know, and they want to say like, oh, we're all one exact human race, all have one common ancestor. The only thing that's different is our skin color and eye color and all that, and it's like it's not a fact. It's just not at all. In fact, it's a complete lie. Not the, and once again, everybody has a right. Here it is. Everybody has a right to life and freedom, essentially. And all I'm trying to do is point out that there are people trying to take away the freedom and have taken away the freedom from very, very many people and are continuing to do so today. But it's like, look, this skull, like a Rothschild, that's one of these. Like the Peruvian skull is like cone head type people. It can, I don't even know that a lot of the ones that I see are more like uh, cone shaped, but also extend back. I guess if you have hair, it kind of look cone shaped the way that they're looking at you, but just like very, very strange stuff. And once again, Stalin and Hitler and Goebbels, they're all a part of this. Like that's not a Germanic white. Like that is a Cro-Magnon skull. That's haplogroup J Neanderthal skull.
And if you look
And
these people up, like some of the rumors and stuff surrounding them, you'll often find that they're actually related, or they're related to these like Illuminati bloodlines.
mm-hmm. They're all all the presidents but two are related to a fake king of England. Like after the Stuarts and King Arthur had been usurped, they're all related. Like they're all part of this bloodline. And like you just look at them and it's like it's so freaking apparent. Like but then once again it's like white people are Nazis. That's their biggest propaganda. Like go punch a Nazi today. But it's like that's funny because the Nazis have the same exact skull and DNA as the people that you know what I'm getting at. And it's just like
It was
it
like a
just
lot of
blows me
these other
away.
situations where these so-called Nazis were being manipulated, and they might have been onto something at some point, but they're being manipulated, and the other side was manipulated, and these
Yeah, like the Antarctic stuff you were talking about. I remember you tweeting about it at some point. There was like the Nazis searching for things in Antarctica.
yeah,
The like they all the hidden tech. You know what? There was a link actually.
they were
Let's see if
on
I can find
to
it. I
something related to this. They were on to something, and that's probably one of the reasons they needed to be stopped, because they weren't playing by the conventional rules, because it was war and they were
yep
going into Tibet and they're measuring people's skulls. God knows what the hell their ultimate goal was there. I hear so many different
yeah
stories.
their obsession with eugenics. It's like they're completely obsessed with it, like to the point where hidden and appropriated inventions of the Tartarians and Basques. Can't remember if I had seen this in the past. I remember he resent this to me, but this is kind of connected to it. The Tartarian transportation cover up, the Baalbek triathlon, energy centers, Sherman neckheads, and the shooting down of energy weapons from above, which very much sounds like Dews or the energies that or sorry, the lasers that many people theorize cause the forest fires. Yeah, but then got to talk about the airplanes which don't run on fuel, and yeah, because they couldn't have as much gasoline as they say. It's more of a that they use the air essentially. Most of our technology comes from usage of like air and airwaves and bending that. And I didn't know trains. Um, Interesting. And automobiles, the same thing. Ocean liners. I wanted to see if they have anything. Spaceships. There are no such thing as spaceships. Paul, I wonder who wrote this, but that's interesting. I've read this before that the atmosphere gets very electrical, and like we can't like survive past too high.
That would
But
make sense. I mean, it's either like electricity or it's radiation. It's something that's not right.
yeah, it's like this Twitter account Gray Tonka was talking about that as well. Let's see. So this is all from Tartaria.
It,
This what this man is claiming. Submarines have admittedly been around since the 1600s. Very interesting stuff. I wish that he had like more references, to be honest, but I certainly believe it. Would not surprise me at all.
basically, the idea is that we think things were invented at a certain time, but those pictures we see,
Mm-hmm.
those tells of things being invented, they might be more like tall tales, really, because there's evidence and there's pictures of
Yep.
things that, yeah, it just doesn't make sense
Well, the
chronologically.
architecture is the architecture proves that they were a lot more advanced, and they have pictures of using electricity in ancient or hieroglyphs, I should say, and all of this crap. And like, who knows what's real or fake? But you can't fake those buildings that deep underground.
And you have like all
Like,
these different Masonic buildings and government buildings that look very old and have almost like a Roman-esque Greek style, and we just think that
yeah,
they copied that style. But how do we know that those buildings aren't from the old world?
and exactly, and they probably steal those architectures and symbols for their like twisted rituals and BS. And another thing is they like to claim that they're the Grail, those bloodlines, but it's as with everything else with those imposters, it's stolen and a lie. And the Holy Grail is a bloodline. It's not a like physical Grail. Like that's the exoteric understanding is that it's like a Grail and you'll drink from it and you'll have eternal life or whatever, like the Indiana Jones stuff. But the esoteric belief is that it's a bloodline, and then you connect to the Rh negative kids being like abducted and stuff, and the rumors of the elite like drinking blood and stuff to stay young, like doing crap like that, and it's like
There's a
very likely that
connection.
like the O negative or just Rh negative in general, like vampire legends and stuff, that probably keeps them young.
Yeah, that's got to be part of this too. Bloodlines, hunting bloodlines, vampirism, staying alive longer. There's some kind of mystery behind the vampire that is related to this. I'm not gonna pretend like I've got that down yet, but there's something to research in the future.
100%. All of these things, they tie a lot together that really is just like all of this stuff, man. I need to go through and reread a lot of these, like the Toothed Danann, were they Irish gods or aliens? Is I've read that one before. Like there's a lot of connections between like fallen angels and aliens and stuff, and like they kind of cover them up as ETs when it's like in reality they're probably from here. Oh, and another thing that I learned, Leviathan was a serpent, or not a well, I guess technically like underground, like or underwater. It could breathe underwater, and that connects back to Atlantis as well. And also, like the biblical stuff speaks of it when like they were turned into serpents and stuff. And it's like, okay, how could the reptilians have survived if they were like a physical thing? And let's say their bloodline had corrupted Atlantis, either them or their hybrids or whatever. How did they survive? Well, maybe all the hybrids like died out from the flood or whatever cataclysmic event caused it. Likely a flood because it's all underwater now. But then the only things that could survive were things that could breathe underwater.
Hmm.
So maybe the purebred ones. I saw a video of somebody talking about this, and they're like, the purebred ones could have just stayed underwater and then came up and restarted the bloodline right after Atlantis.
Which is
And
basically the story of the Merovingians and the sea beast that they say they
mm-hmm.
descend from.
Yep, the Leviathan, then it would be the
Wow.
same story. Yeah, I forgot to share that with you. I was like, I need to bring this up and remember it.
That is
And
a
it
trip.
connects with the Bible too. And it's the same. And that's what I'm saying. These cultures all connect. Like, it's not just the New Age stuff. Like, they all are pieced together. And
And the important thing is,
there's
like you
even
said
more.
earlier, this isn't just some mumbo jumbo we were making up on the spot. This is what they believe.
Mm-hmm. Like, I couldn't have, literally, I'm not creative enough to have come up with half this crap on my own. And this is like in their writings, like Blavatsky, all these Freemasons, they believe it. And also it connects to the UFO stuff where people, including Bill Cooper, said that he saw a UFO emerge from deep in the ocean out of water, and he had to report it and like say that he'd never talk about it, and then he wrote about it in his book and all that crap. But so many people say that they see UFOs coming out from underwater or they go into the water, and it's like, could that be like how they survived and like where they are inhabiting now? And then there's like inner Earth too with the North Pole, and I can't speak on that, or Antarctica beyond that. Who the hell knows? But the I do know for a fact that a lot of people talk about UFOs from under what do you call it, from underwater and in the
Yeah.
ocean, and that connects to Leviathan and these serpents and the serpent bloodline that the hybrids supposedly rule, or at least they claim that they're the hybrids and descend from that.
Well, everybody wants
And
to
then,
know more about these reptilians. Everybody, we're all kind of stuck at Ike, but right here and now,
yeah,
we're giving you guys some new information that it's being put out there. You just have to be willing to take it in and willing to maybe do a little research of
mm-hmm.
your own.
And come and yeah, and that's the thing. Like, just take what you're learning and research it on your own, because if you'll probably find more things than like I've been able to piece together here. And the another interesting thing with their rituals, like they're talking about how they have like these like demonic or like interdimensional entities try and like enter them and stuff, and how they're so obsessed with the bloodlines and like the trauma and rituals that come along with it. The something that was interesting that I saw, um, it was these people discussing that you talk about why these hybrid races are so valued. Well, spiritually, a lot of belief is like, oh, if you have a dog, then, or a cat, for example, a cat has a cat's soul in it, right? And this is just one spiritual belief. I'm not saying that this is like guaranteed fact, just more of like a theory. But and then let's say you have a mixed beast where like you have like a lion and a tiger that were like not created by our creator, but we're sort of like mixed or merged together using DNA. There's a theory that then a lion's soul cannot like isn't compatible with that, but neither is a tiger's, whatever. Not saying like all ligers or whatever, like obviously that would be BS, but basically what they're saying is like apply that, like that soul couldn't fit into it, so then it makes it easier, like it'd be like a unique soul that would have to do it, and so that makes it easier for these entities to enter in. So they're like these demonic bloodlines or like serpent seed bloodlines, it's easier for an interdimensional entity to enter it because of that. And I was like, that's an interesting thought. because it at least explains why they're so damn obsessed with like their rituals and all that crap. Could be total BS, but I just figured it's a cool theory.
Well, hey, unfortunately, we are getting close to hour 3, so we should
Yeah,
probably wrap this up pretty soon.
100%. Yeah, I think I got pretty much everything out that I wanted to share with, have people think about. So
Yeah, tons of information here. If you are listening to the podcast audio format, I highly encourage you to jump on YouTube. That way you can see the visual element that CMurph laid out here. I think you're going to get a lot more out of it if you watch it on YouTube and don't just listen to the audio version of the show. So please do that, everybody. That way you get the full picture.
yeah, thank you so much for having me again, Daniel. Sorry I had to reschedule so many times, but hopefully it was worth it. Gets people to discover even more.
Oh, that's my fault. I was all over the. I mean, this research is just so fascinating. It's. I'm getting into it myself, and then there's all this other crap going on. It's just been so hectic. I do appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on. We got this Zoom working, which is fantastic. First time ever using this on the show, so
Mm-hmm.
that's a big step for me in this show. So I appreciate you coming on and working with me and being willing to move the date ahead a couple times. It really came together, I think, and we could always do this again. I mean, your research is ongoing, so we're gonna have to catch up with you at some point.
Yeah, I'll give it some more time, and then I'll probably have like a new Leviathan Atlantis theory just coming out of
Awesome,
the
I love it.
woodworks.
I love it. I think listeners out there are gonna appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think that if there's any luck, somebody will take this and like run with it farther than I have. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I can
But
say
thank you
that.
again.
Yeah, absolutely. This a lot of these things that you've showed me have motivated me to want to do my own research, because this information, it can be hard to come by, and I think a good message to everybody is to do your own research, because you just can't trust what
Mm-hmm.
anybody says. If there's any lesson to come
Yep.
from this, it's to put the work in, and history can be a lot more fun than a lot of people out there probably think.
Yeah, and that's why literally if it wasn't for the DNA, I would probably have written off a lot of this as new age stuff, but there you go. There's just more links than I even expected. I
How,
thought I
how's
knew
it
more than I did.
how's it going for you? Any more you getting stalked by any more UFOs or anything?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. The quarantine has been weird. My sister and I have both seen a lot of weird stuff. I haven't been like running around as much as I usually am, so I haven't been outside. But I feel like every other time I go outside, it's something weird. There's always helicopters flying around, which isn't really a UFO, but my sister and I have seen like at least 3 or 4 guaranteed weird ones, and that's we see them a lot. She said that she saw one going down on the highway once, and it's like the orbs are the common ones that we keep on seeing, but it it hasn't been as ridiculous as it was when I was in New York. I don't know why. I feel like New York has like a crazy culmination of that, but it's just I think they're probably still there. I'm just not outside as much, but I have still seen it, and it, that's been interesting enough on its own. I'm kind of glad to not be noticing it as much as I have the past couple of weeks, because it's just that shit got tiring very fast. But
Doesn't it almost seem like ever since COVID hit that a lot more information has been coming out? Like somehow knowledge is being uh what is that saying from Revelations? Knowledge will increase. Doesn't it seem like maybe
yeah,
knowledge is increasing?
yeah, 100%. And it's even I know that this is kind of disinfo, but like even the Pentagon was like, "Oh yeah, this UFO footage is real now," and like they'll use that for their own means. But I think a lot of people are starting to notice. Like my sister showed me like TikToks that she watches of people that have like seen crap in the skies, and I'm like, this is getting pretty common apparently, because I don't think that like the normal person would be like I saw one. I'll try and find it. I'll maybe send it to you later. Where it was like this orb, and it just started like flashing above a family, and they were like freaking out, and they're just, it's like a normal like family with like kids, and
They're
and it
like,
was a
what the
TikTok, and
hell?
I was just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're just like, what the fuck? But I was just like, man, this must be getting very bad. Like, well, not, I don't know, whatever. It must be getting very common because apparently people are noticing it, and I feel like the Pentagon wouldn't like release that unless people were asking too many
You
questions.
know, I almost feel like I think you're kind of alluding to this, but it's almost like they release those kind of, I think they're kind of crappy, the Pentagon UFO
Yeah.
videos compared to the ones that people are just taking out there during the COVID. It seems to me like
Mm-hmm.
UFO sightings
To
have increased
distract it.
massively.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like the I'm telling you, there's something weird about this like age or cycle that we're in because there is just so much going on in the skies. Like I would seriously recommend that people just whenever there's a clear sky, just go out and like check it every once in a while, especially at night, because you're gonna see some weird crap. Odds are, if it's like anywhere clear, and it's like that connects to a whole nother thing. But remember, like with this Tartarian tech and ancient tech, these beings, like the Bible claims that the fallen angels and whatever Nephilim, and then their half breeds, the seraphim were the fallen ones, right? And then the half breeds were the Nephilim. They claim that all of this knowledge and technology came from them. So like that's basically saying these interdimensional beings had like very advanced tech, and that was thousands of years ago. So like now it would make sense that they're running around with even crazier crap that people are noticing. And now they're probably so confident with it, they don't even care if we see them.
It's almost like they reset us and then they're like, here's your technology back, here's your shit back.
Yep. Yeah, it's like, and that's the thing with Egypt too, with this like Basque stuff, and same with Atlantis. It's like they get so much knowledge and they like learn electricity and they get all this crap, and then they just boom, like they're just wiped out, or whatever happens, whether it's a mud flood, a plasma event, earthquakes, like just a war, whatever, they're gone. You know what I mean? Like Tartaria, it's pretty. Even if the people still exist, most of the civilization's gone. Most of ancient Egypt's gone. Most of any of them. It's really, really insane. And I do think that it all has to interlink. And I bet that they have some technology like it that we don't know. Like some of the UFOs could just be like serpent seeds, just roaming around using that tech. And it's very hard to tell, but it also is more likely interdimensional in
Yeah, that's
general,
a good
I would say.
point because a lot of us, when we talk about aliens, we neglect to say they could be what are known as ultra terrestrials, meaning they're from the Earth or ocean or
Mm-hmm.
another dimension close by, something like that.
Yep. And that's what I think they all are. I don't think any of them are from another planet or galaxy or whatever BS they want to throw. Not that it's impossible, but just like, they're coming from the water, or that you have hollow earth, and these things don't seem to be like you know what I mean? Like, are they really going to travel hundreds of billions of light years just to come like anal probe a cow for 100,000 times? Like, doesn't make sense to me.
And a lot
But
of times they're complaining about us messing up the environment. It's like if they're from another planet, why would they care?
yeah, it's just it doesn't make any sense, and it's like it's all very demonic, like the experiments that they do. It's not like it's like giving them any like true scientific insight from my understanding at all, and they've been repeating it for thousands of years. So it's like this just all just seems like very negative, like archontic, parasitic behavior, not like, oh, I'm an advanced super being that's come here to give you enlightenment by like abducting you and poking you.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that's
make any
not
sense.
enlightening. It's the opposite of that. It's
Like,
no, it's
and
just like you
and
say. It's no different than, some of these tales we hear of succubi and demons and
yeah, and these myths and legends are like describing it with better accuracy, but it's like these entities have just rebranded themselves as extraterrestrials with the help of Hollywood, and now they're like cool and people want it. Because when I first started like searching for this type of crap, I was like, as a kid, like, why can't I just see an alien? And then weird crap happen, or like a UFO or something, and then once it actually happens, you're like, wow, that's a very nasty feeling that you got from that. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
strange.
It's
Maybe
really
they're good. I don't know, but I haven't
well,
experienced
it's hard for
like a
anything to be the
great
same.
UFO experience.
Once you've seen something like that, it's hard to go back to normal. It's hard for life to ever be the same.
Yeah.
Once you've laid eyes upon the unknown, you'll be asking questions for the rest of your life because you know that there is
Hmm.
something magical out there that's just beyond what we could possibly know as a race or a human a species.
Yeah, and my sister and her best friend saw the closest like UFO that I'd ever seen in my entire life was like the black cube. I think I described it on the last show, but it was literally like a black cube like hovering with plane wings and like all these weird orb lights and like this weird flashlight that it would like spot at us, and like it was the scariest fucking thing. I told him to just run because it was right above us, and then it like came back around and was flashing lights, but I just
That's
remember like
spooky.
when I got back inside.
That is
What?
that is very spooky.
Oh, it scared the shit out of me. When it flashed the spotlight, I had this like draining feeling in my gut, like the worst body punch. Like my body was just being like, my energy was like sucked. It was like stage right, all these weird feelings. And I was just like, all right, we got to get out of here. Like something told me to leave. And then when we looked back around, we like ran a block and looked back, and it had come back around, and all these like orb lights were like coming out of it. And I'm like, all right, we got to get out of here. So we went back inside. And when I came back inside, I'm like, you realize nobody's going to believe like what just happened to us, right? Like that was like my first thought. And then my second thought was, thank God they were with me, because if I was alone, I would have just been sitting there like, what the fuck? And like, because now like that, at least I have two people who like understand what happened there, along with anybody else who's experienced crap like that. But just like in my personal life, I wasn't alone. Because like if I was alone, I think I would have been asking myself so many questions.
Yeah, that's actually when we first started talking to each other. We figured out that we both kind of had that in common. Where we were in the past, we were well, you currently as well, but we were stalked by these freaking weird black triangle cube transforming weird ass
Yeah,
vehicles.
they like transform with like light and orbs, and it's like I've never seen it before. Like when I looked around, I was like, we better get out of here because it just got very real very fast. And and you know the thing is, it seems like once again everybody who's having these experiences where these things like come after them or stalk them or just observe, like the Watchers and Enoch they call them, and it describes it very well because that's kind of what they do. They just sort of watch and like
Yeah.
mess around a little bit, but they all have the same like they all have the same some level of Atlantean blood in them. Like Life is a Mirage that had it. My sister, her friend, blonde hair, blue eyes, like her friend definitely did. You definitely do. So it's like everybody who seems to experience this has connections to the Rh negative thing again. And then that thing, the this stupid thing, said they're prone to alien abductions. Now I don't think that they're aliens, but I, that's definitely they experience unexplained phenomenon, psychic dreams and or ability. I have dreams where I'll have it, and then like weeks or months later it'll just be real life. It's like reverse deja vu. It's the weirdest crap.
Well, just the
But
fact that these aliens are picking up these Rh negative people and taking tissue and blood samples, I mean, that says it all right there. They're monitoring them and they're probably checking the levels in their blood and seeing what's what, and they're keeping
mm-hmm.
very close track of this stuff.
And you know the like DNA tests now, it's like with the HIPAA laws, they can't like take this from a ton of doctors. You know, like they can't just go and like get everybody's blood type and like get everybody's information and blood from hospitals. Like you're not allowed to do that, regardless of how corrupt you are. That'd be such a massive scale operation. So it's like you think about it, these people are very smart. Their next best idea is like, okay, well, if we can't do that, then we'll tell them where they're from and like give them this DNA test, and then they'll pay us for it, and we'll have their information.
Oh,
And it's like,
just wait until everybody's chipped and they know what your blood type is, your whole
mm-hmm.
medical history, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be a nightmare for Rh negative people.
Yep, and they're definitely going to lose certain abilities if they fall for that or get forced to do that,
Mm.
and it's just a damn shame. But you know, I don't think that that has to be the future, and I don't think that that will be the future for everyone, even if it gets to that point. So
And how are we gonna keep track of you? Are you still doing the Twitter? Are you thinking about a YouTube channel or
yeah,
anything?
I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel. I already have one. I haven't uploaded any videos. I just kind of use it to comment and check things out. It's the same name as my Twitter at, but I do want to start doing videos, and now I have more time, so maybe I'll get on that sometime this week after I'm done with
If I could give
all
you
my
one piece of
BS
advice,
responsibilities.
if I could give you one piece of advice, I think it's good to use YouTube because there's so many people on there. But like
Mm-hmm.
almost everybody, especially on controversial topics like bloodlines and stuff like that, if you just started like
Yeah,
on one of these other services that actually pays you money, I think would be like a better long term thing because you're not going to get censored and you could actually make some money off of it. And that's kind of my advice for everybody that's looking to
yeah,
get into this.
that's smart. Do you know if BitChute does that? I know a lot of good people
I believe so.
um, use that, and that doesn't seem like that's where I found a lot of videos on this information, and they don't seem to get taken down.
Yeah, exactly. I'm destined to cross over one of those platforms myself, but I started the show a long time ago, so you know how that went. It's almost impossible nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's tough, and I don't know if this works or not, but I tried to save some of the more controversial stuff for the end of the video so that people are just scanning through and they won't try and report it here because I'm sure that I've seen so many accounts talk about less than what we have and dealt with worse. So,
Do you have any final messages for the End of Days Radio audience out there?
just thank everybody for listening to this and having an open mind. And I just hope that everybody researches for themselves and hope everybody is blessed, takes care of themselves. And yeah, if they're at my Twitter ad is at ConSmurph, CONSMURPH. If you hit me up there, I can give you any of the research and links or information or other people that have delved into this even deeper than me and all the sources. So if anybody wants to follow up on it, welcome to share with anybody. And yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. And part of the reason why I'm drawing things to close is I need to use the bathroom.
Yeah, it's
That's
late here. It's
yeah.
almost one.
If I didn't have to do those bodily functions, I could probably do like 5 hour shows. But unfortunately, nature calls. So, CMurph, buddy, I appreciate you coming on so much, and I will talk to you again in the future, my friend.
Yo, take care, man. Thank you as well.
Good night.
Night.
And there you have it. That is our guest, CMurph. And let's see here. Let me bring that up. Oh my. What an interesting show that was. I see lots of people listening to the live show. I do appreciate that. Oh my god, how do I even follow up with that? Boy, looks like we've got, let's see, any questions in the chat? Lots of good feedback. Excellent. Some people talking about their parents being RH negative. Let's see here. Talking about being psychic. Interesting. I just like to pop in and check out that feedback inside of the YouTube chat. It's neat because we could always gather here and kind of chat and talk about stuff during shows. Usually, right now, I would kind of be like shooting the shit with you guys a little bit, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and call things to a close because it's been 3 hours and I do have a show coming up Saturday. And this was a little different, so it was very experimental. So I want to make sure everything is done right. So I'm gonna let you guys go. I appreciate you joining us here on End of Days Radio. Remember to go to endofdaysradio.com, and I will talk to you next time.